Chapter 64. GAG. 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 From time to time, unpleasant bird cries could be heard coming from the castle's study. The winged peregrine falcon hatchling was quite ugly. Its whole body was covered with fine, invisible fluff, which curled up and stuck to its skin. It looked like a plucked chicken. Compared to the streamlined adult winged peregrine falcon flying in the sky, it was worlds apart. Liszt, however, liked it very much. After all, it was a flying World of Warcraft. There was already a flying dust dog in the castle. From time to time, he would take it out for a walk and place a few rock thorns on it, which was very pleasing to the eye. If there was another winged peregrine falcon, it could summon a wind blade from time to time, which would definitely be very eye-catching. Unfortunately, falcons did not recognize their master. Liszt still had no idea how to tame it. He could only feed it first. However, he already had the castles made, so a pair of leather gloves. He had seen a video of playing with falcons before. In the video, the players wore leather gloves and let the falcons land on them. There seemed to be a small toy. By throwing the toy, it would attract the falcons to pounce on it, and then taking the toy back, the falcons would only hover nearby and not fly away. When I have time, I should study this toy. It would be best to go to Coral City and ask around if there are any hunters who raise birds and how they tame them. At the banquet, they ate roasted fruit-stealing monkey meat. It was not as delicate as roast beef. It was a bit dry and not easy to bite. However, it was unknown if it was because they often ate fragrant coconut. After the monkey meat was roasted, there was a faint coconut juice fragrance. This unique taste was different from ordinary roasted meat. It was very popular at the banquet. If the fruit-stealing monkey meat could be made a little more delicate, it would definitely be a famous dish. I suggest that the town raise them in large numbers. Gort ate until his mouth was covered in oil. Liszt was much more refined. Because he did not choose to eat the roasted fruit-stealing monkey meat, he just watched others eat heartily. Raising them in large numbers is a good thing. I also decided to do so. However, eating meat is not a good idea. Monkeys have high IQ, they should be trained to pick fruits from trees and work for fruit farmers. According to the theory of his hometown, humans and monkeys had a common ancestor, they were both primates. There was no such concept in this world. Humans were humans, and there was no such thing as evolution. Apart from dragons and elves, all other creatures were inferior to humans. In fact, in many people's eyes, dragons and elves were just slightly more magical creatures that could not be compared to humans. Eating dragons, eating spirits, and even humans eating humans, wasn't unheard of. Therefore, even if he didn't eat, he wouldn't stop others from eating. Isaiah asked curiously, "Sir, can the monkeys really be trained to help the fruit farmers?" Of course. It's just like training dogs and horses. The reason why Liszt was so sure was because he had seen a lot of monkey shows. He had also seen a piece of news in Malaysia or Thailand where the locals would train monkeys to climb trees to pluck coconut. There was a fruit farmer who mistreated his monkey. In the end, the monkey got angry and smashed the farmer to death with wild fruit. Now, the fruit-stealing monkeys belonged to Liszt. After they were trained and given to the fruit farmers, no one would dare to mistreat them. It probably wouldn't kill the owner. If the fruit-stealing monkeys were really trained, it would certainly be an interesting situation. I never thought that monkeys could work for us. Blair laughed as if he could already see the scene of monkeys picking fruit. Liszt smiled and said, "In that case, I'll leave the task of training the fruit-stealing monkeys to you, Blair." All right, I think I'm competent." At this time, Marcus suddenly said, "Sir, how do we deal with the winged peregrine falcon's corpse? Do you need me to go to Coral City and sell it?" The winged peregrine falcon was a low-level World of Warcraft. Selling it for 10 gold coins wouldn't be a problem. If it was before, Liszt would certainly sell it for money to buy daily necessities. But now, the thief didn't lack money. The income from the Black Tulip was enough to support his aristocratic lifestyle for decades. The rich and overbearing List said on the spot. No need to buy it, let's dry the meat first. When are we going to hold a wind peregrine falcon barbecue party? As for the other parts, does Teacher Marcus have any suggestions on how to use them? Bird bones are hollow, especially the bones of the wind peregrine falcon, which have wind-attributed magic power. The articulated bones can be made into bone whistles, which are very loud. The larger bones can be made into tools, which are light and sturdy, and are more useful than ironware. In addition, its feathers are excellent materials for making arrows. Marcus quickly planned out the use of the wind peregrine falcon's materials. Sir is about to learn archery and will need a batch of arrows. List asked, Is there anyone in the fief who can make arrows? Marcus immediately replied, I can, I make my own arrows. Thank you, Teacher Marcus. List picked up a glass filled with hops beer. This glass is a tribute to you. Thanks to the 2 arrows in the afternoon, the wind peregrine falcon stayed. Otherwise, it would have been a huge disaster. I am willing to serve, sir. Marcus happily raised the beer without hops and drank it in one gulp. The bonfire was extinguished, and the sky was filled with stars. Gort, Marcus, and the rest had already returned. The servants were busy cleaning up the mess left behind by the banquet. List was carrying the milk tea that housekeeper Carter brought over. He was used to drinking a cup of milk tea before going to bed. The rich nutrition of milk was what his body urgently needed. 16 years old, the age of growth. Master, the bath water has been prepared for you. How is the wind peregrine falcon chick? It is still calling out with all its might, but I have already fed it a lot of small fish and prawns. It is definitely not hungry. But master, this little bird is really ugly. I agree with you. Then, go and take a look at this little fellow. If it is going to cry for the whole night, then take it out. I don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night. List passed the empty glass to Carter and walked towards the castle. When he met a servant who was working, the servant would stop and bow to him. This feeling was very good. He was getting more and more used to his identity as an aristocrat. His head and butt were tilted to the side of the aristocracy. Whoever dared to shake the foundation of the aristocracy was going against him. List. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Revealing an impeccable aristocratic smile, List opened his mouth and said, I hope that all of you can have a good dream until dawn. Thank you, master. Immediately, List had already gone to the second floor, which was his exclusive room. Carter pushed open the door of the study. The room that was quiet just now was immediately filled with unpleasant bird cries. Caw-gee, caw-gee, caw-gee. No matter how many times I hear it, it still sounds unpleasant. List looked at the ugly curly-haired bird in a small nest that was simply padded with hay. Mr. Carter, what do you think it should be called? Outside the castle, there is a shivering docen that was found in the forest. Perhaps this shivering little bird found on the fragrant coconut tree can be called shakily coconut? Although Carter misunderstood the meaning of docen, List still laughed. Mr. Carter, you are getting more and more humorous. But I don't like the name shakily coconut. It looks curly. I hope it has the luck to live until the day it can fly. Let's call it Blessed Curls. Chapter 65. Early the next morning, List took Blessed Curl's nest and hung it on the castle's windowsill. On one hand, he wanted to let it bask in the sun, and on the other hand, he was fed up with the bird's cries. He didn't know what happened last night, but it actually cried in the middle of the night. At this time, Blessed Curls had just eaten small fish and shrimps, so it was full of energy. It crawled around in the nest, constantly making quack sounds. In the kennel outside the castle, Docen poked its head out and stared at Blessed Curls on the windowsill, drooling. Woof woof! Seeing List go out, it immediately wagged its tail cheerfully, rattling the iron chain around its neck. List really was raising a dog. He had been using a dog chain since childhood. List untied the chain and held it in his hand. Dosen immediately spread its hooves and madly ran. The time when List took it for a walk every day was probably the happiest time of the day. Leading Dosen to the horse field, List began to train. When Dosen was small, he usually trained once a day, but now it had been reduced to once every 3 days. He successfully taught Dosen not to hurt people or release magic without a password. At the same time, it was not allowed to casually eat and drive the horses on the horse field. Of course, apart from Black Dragon, other horses would make a detour when they saw Dosen. "Sit down, Dosen." Dosen, who was running happily a moment ago, immediately crouched down and looked at List with its tongue out, not much different from a native dog. List threw a small ball made of leather. "Pick it up, Dosen." Dosen immediately shot out like an arrow. After a few steps, it jumped, turned 180 degrees in the air, and smoothly caught the ball with its mouth. Then, it shot back and placed it in List's hand. "Very good." He rewarded Dosen with a small piece of jerky. Next, he repeatedly trained several things, including releasing magic rockthorns. Only when Dosen was exhausted and out of breath did List tie up the chain again and give it to Thomas. "Take it back." "Yes, master." Looking at the position of the sun, List felt that the logging team should have arrived today. However, it was not the logging team that had rushed over. Instead, it was a patrol member. "Lord, urgent report." "Speak." "A tilted sail ship is drifting on the east coast. Someone is waving a flag on the ship. Sir Gort thinks that it's a ship that's in distress. He's organizing people to prepare for a rescue. He asked me to immediately come and report to you, my lord." Hearing the news, List's spirit was lifted, and he immediately said to the patrol member, "I'll rush over now. Tell Gort that he must rescue the wrecked ship, especially the people on board." By the time List finished changing into Frackabier, who had gone out, he led the 4 Retainer Knight and the Earth Knight Marcus to the east coast. He saw a group of people pulling on ropes by the sea, dragging a ship that wasn't too big, but wasn't too small either. Among the people pulling the ropes, there were a few unfamiliar faces. Sir Lord Isaiah, who was in charge of pulling the ship, bowed in salute. Gort also hurried over from the sea. "List, these are refugees from the small Kerchief Island. They escaped from the small Kerchief Island by ship, intending to seek refuge in the big Kerchief Island. However, they encountered a storm and their ship was damaged. They could only drift along with the sea breeze to the Coral Island and get stranded on the east coast." List nodded. He had heard of the small Kerchief Island and the big Kerchief Island. At this moment, a somewhat hunchbacked old man walked over to him and knelt in salute from a distance. "Respected Sir Baron of the Flower Town, I, the one in distress, Burnell Mosquito, offer you my sincere greetings and express my deepest apologies for disturbing the noble Sir." Mosquito? List had heard of many strange surnames, yet he still felt that the name Mosquito was very strange. "Sir, my family has been collecting sea otter's eggs for Sir Lord Small Kerchief Island for generations. The agricultural harvest was difficult to guarantee, food was scarce in many places, and the fear and ignorance of the sea had led to the fishing industry being practically non-existent. At the same time, the serfs were forced to find ways to obtain food in order to ensure the luxurious lifestyle of the aristocrats in the castle. Among them, sea otters' eggs had become a source of food. Sea otters were gull-type seabirds, and their nests were generally built on seaside cliff. To collect sea otters' eggs, one had to risk their lives by climbing 100-meter-tall cliffs and fighting against the sea otters protecting the eggs. It could be said that it was not easy for the serfs to survive and leave behind descendants. "Understood." List extended his hand and motioned for Burnell to get up. "Why did you escape from the small Kerchief Island?" "The small Kerchief Island was attacked by a group of pirates, the castle fell, and Sir Lord Small Kerchief's fate was unknown. We had to seize the pirate's ship and escape from the small Kerchief Island. Originally, we were going to take refuge in the big Kerchief Island, but we encountered a fierce storm and the ship nearly capsized. We ended up in Sir's territory. List unconsciously frowned. The Small Kerchief Island was attacked by pirates. The Small Kerchief Island was the territory of Viscount Small Kerchief's family. If he remembered correctly, the current lord was called Vincent Small Kerchief. 100 years ago, this family and the Big Kerchief Island's Viscount Nar Big Kerchief belonged to the same family, the Kerchief family. The handkerchiefs sewn by this family were very famous. Later on, one branch inherited the family title, while the other made meritorious deeds on the battlefield and became viscounts. Thereupon, one branch changed their surname to Big Kerchief and the other to Small Kerchief. The pirates looted the castle and massacred the people on the island. We could only flee. What do you decide to do now? List looked at the damaged sailboat. The sail had been torn and the hull had several holes. At this time, the ship had already been pulled ashore and a group of stooped people helped each other disembark. Do you continue to take refuge in the Big Kerchief Island or stay in the Flower Town? Burnell's turbid eyes suddenly flashed with a ray of hope. Sir, can we stay in the Flower Town? List naturally wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. If you stay, I can grant you the status of serfs. There are many wastelands in the Flower Town that can be granted to you for farming. Serfs who are skilled in a trade can be put in an important position. Report to Sir Gort whether you want to stay or leave. The ship was damaged and stranded. They simply couldn't leave. Besides, what was the difference between going to the Big Kerchief Island and staying in the Flower Town? Therefore, after a simple discussion with the other refugees, Burnell reported to Gort that they would all stay and become Flower Town's serfs, pledging their loyalty to List. Since they had become serfs, it meant that these people, including the broken ship, were List's asset. Teacher Gort, take inventory of the newly joined serfs, and then add them to the various settlements. In addition, the sailboat also has to be cleaned up. I want to know what is inside the ship. The ship seized from the pirates must have some weapons, right? Gort's attitude was positive. Please rest assured, List. These serfs cannot hide even a piece of bread from you. Everything they carry, as well as everything about each of them, will be clearly presented to you. It will only take half a day. Don't forget about the ship. If it can be repaired, then repair it. Chapter 66. Banquet. It seemed that banquets were being held in the castle every day. For aristocrats, eating and drinking was a normal life. The Small Kerchief Island has encountered pirates. Teacher Marcus, are pirates very popular in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire? List asked as he ate the barbecue. Marcus pondered for a moment before replying. Just from the information about pirates, many small islands have been baptized by pirates. However, there may be another reason. What reason? These pirates are most likely in disguise. Not every aristocratic family can manage a rich estate. When they are on the verge of bankruptcy, taking risks out of desperation will become a shortcut for them to redeem themselves. Especially between aristocrats who have enmity with each other, they will even use the identity of pirates to loot each other's wealth. Hearing this gory information, if it was the 16-year-old youngster of his predecessor, it was very likely that he would be unwilling to accept it. It was inconceivable that an aristocrat who boasted of his noble bloodline and possessed countless qualities would actually moonlight as a pirate. However, the current List only frowned slightly before quickly relaxing his brows. Fortunately, the Coral Island has the powerful orders of chivalry. For the time being, the Flower Town is not in danger of pirates. However, we have to be vigilant in times of peace. Teacher Marcus, the night squad must be trained well. Please rest assured, sir. I will go all out to train the night squad and turn every one of them into a qualified knight on the battlefield. List then asked Gort, Teacher Gort, give me the information about the new serfs now. I feel that it is best to talk about official business while eating. If you like, then let's talk now. Gort motioned for a servant to bring his coat. He then took out a thick bast paper from his pocket and opened it. There are a total of 50 serfs. In fact, they were originally freedmen. Therefore, after the pirates attacked, they wisely chose to escape. The small kerchief island had a small kerchief city. The 50 people were the citizens of the city, and had their own industries. The relationship between freedmen and lords was more like that between tenants and landlords, while serfs were slaves. For the nobles, the serfs were their own people, while the freedmen were outsiders. In the event of a war between lords, the lords would choose to protect their serfs, who were their wealth. However, there was no such protection for free people. They deserved to die, and the lord could also earn some extra income. Thus, there were advantages and disadvantages to being a free citizen. Not everyone wanted to be a free citizen. Seeing that Viscount Smallkerchief was defeated, and that they would be killed and robbed by the pirates at any time, some of the freedmen of Smallkerchief City hurriedly fled. They cleverly chose to seize a ship. While the pirates were still fighting in the castle, they seized a sailboat. Unfortunately, they only had a captain who knew how to steer the ship, but not a skilled crew. In the end, they lost control in the storm. That's why none of them know how to farm. They're all free citizens with skills. Liszt was very satisfied with this. For the development of the territory, craftsmen were more important than simple farmers. In the future, farmers could sell as many slaves as they wanted, but craftsmen were very difficult to get. Blacksmiths, cooper makers, embroidery workers, tailors, bakers, winemakers, shoeshine workers, carpenters, dyers, soap makers, tanners, sugar workers, salt workers, locksmiths, cooks and their families. Oh, there are also innkeepers and horse dealers, as well as several street peddlers. What is Burnell's profession? Liszt recalled the old man who spoke to him during the day. He is a soap maker who can make all kinds of fragrant soaps with the scent of flowers. Very well, I've had enough of using honey locust powder to take a bath. It would be best to have him quickly make the honey locust powder into fragrant soap. As a person who loved cleanliness and had to take a bath every day, Liszt had a huge demand for fragrant soap. Unfortunately, the castle did not have that much fragrant soap, only some honey locust powder, which was the powder ground from the fruit of the honey locust tree. Honey locust powder could indeed be used to wash clean, but it was very troublesome, and it didn't feel good when washing. In fact, Liszt knew of a more concise cleaning product, pancreas. It was a kind of soap made from a mixture of pig pancreas and plant ashes. It was very simple to make, just mash the pig pancreas and plant ashes and stir them together to make the simplest pancreas. Unfortunately, there was no one in the flour town to feed pigs. He cut a piece of roast meat, forked it, and dipped it in ketchup. The roast meat with ketchup tasted good. After swallowing it, he drank a mouthful of seafood soup, and then wiped his mouth with a napkin. Mr. Carter and Teacher Gort will discuss the work arrangements for the new serfs. The right ones can be arranged to go to the town and help them set up shops specifically for the castle's manufacturing needs. There were too few residents in the town, and obviously there was not much demand. As the lord, he had to enjoy all of it. Only in this way could these craftsmen play a role in a short period of time. Carter bowed and said, "Yes, master, I will consult Mr. Gort." After talking about the matter of the new serfs, Liszt talked about another official business. The logging team's work efficiency still needs to be improved. However, a new problem has arisen. There will often be other things that will lead me and Teacher Marcus away. At that time, the logging team's defensive power will be useless, which is very dangerous. However, we really cannot find any more power to defend the Thorns Ridges world of Warcraft. Therefore, I think that there is a need for a way for the logging team to have the power to protect themselves even if they encounter the world of Warcraft. Liszt said faintly. No one answered immediately. They were all thinking. Liszt was not in a hurry as he continued to eat his dinner. In fact, he was testing the several people present. He already had an idea which was very likely to be able to deal with the World of Warcraft. This method originated from the smoke mission. After the rescue in the morning, he had completed the mission. Mission completed. Reward: 50 people. Mission: dangers may occur in the depths of the Thorns Ridge at any time. The logging team is in a precarious situation. As a lord who owns a piece of smoke grass, you should reasonably use the resources to protect the safety of your subjects. Please resist the invasion of the World of Warcraft. Reward: super small mineral deposit. The mission prompt was very clear. Smoke grass could be used to resist the World of Warcraft. List had a very deep impression of the smell of smoke grass. World of Warcraft might not be able to withstand it, especially since some World of Warcraft characters had very sensitive noses. Therefore, he planned to use smoke grass to make simple World of Warcraft mosquito-repellent incense and ignite it whenever he encountered a World of Warcraft. He was determined to obtain the super small mineral deposit. However, he didn't directly state his plan. Instead, he hoped that someone could come up with this method. Otherwise, he would feel like he was raising a bunch of freeloaders. After a while, no one came up with a good idea. Chapter 67. Were wild beasts afraid of fire? This was quite an interesting question. Gort shook his head and put forward a different opinion. Not all wild beasts are afraid of fire. Some wild beasts are even curious about fire, let alone the fire-attributed World of Warcraft, which is naturally close to fire sources. Marcus pondered. I think that this method is not necessarily impossible. Wild beasts would naturally not be afraid of a small fire, but I believe that even the fire-attributed World of Warcraft would not want to get close to a big fire. The pine tree branches cut by the logging team are not of great value. What we want are the trunks. The discussion revolved around making a fire for a quarter of an hour. Soon after, Blair added, we can let the fief's hunters participate in cutting down trees and have them set up traps in the surroundings. It might not work against World of Warcraft, but it would at least serve as an early warning. Coupled with a bonfire, I believe that it would be enough to ensure the safety of the logging team's serfs. Finally, List made the decision. Bonfire, traps, these are measures worth trying. However, do not ignore a certain crop in the flower town. What crop? Everyone was curious. Smoke grass. Smoke grass? Oh heavens, how could I have forgotten about this terrible grass? Gort immediately gesticulated in an exaggerated manner. I am absolutely convinced that as long as a bit of smoke grass is lit, even a dragon would run away from it. That smell. List, the smell of smoke grass burning on the dairy farm is still fresh in my memory. Dragons would not run away from the smell, on the contrary, they would be attracted. List narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked at Gort's expression and was convinced that the other party had just unconsciously mentioned this matter and was not inquiring about the details. On the day of the invisible dragon's invasion, the burning of the smoke grass, the death of the dairy farm's cows, the destroyed beacon tower, and the resounding and sharp dragon roar were all puzzling to others. However, List had said not to inquire about it. Therefore, they could only suppress these doubts at the bottom of their hearts until they were forgotten. I am also convinced of this. When researching the smoke grass, I smeared a bit of smoke grass juice on the nose of the cyan rabbit. The cyan rabbit suffered for 2 days and almost fell ill. Isaiah nodded in agreement. The cyan rabbit was his mount, a cyan horse. So, List put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth, and stopped eating. Fire, traps, and smoke grass. These 3 measures protect the logging team and ensure that World of Warcraft doesn't harm anyone. Mr. Gort and Mr. Marcus, please cooperate with each other to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Yes, my lord. Marcus accepted the order. Gort nodded quickly. Leave it to me, List. List added, in addition, we've finally found the value of the smoke grass, so I've decided to cultivate the smoke grass to the north of the flower farm and expand the scale of the cultivation of the smoke grass. Teacher Gort, you need to come up with a plan and implement it as soon as possible. Maybe we haven't cultivated enough wasteland. Gort said hesitantly. There is a serious shortage of serfs. There weren't many serfs to begin with. The oyster settlement, the logging team, the road repair team, the fief shop apprentices, and even the night squad and the castle servants have all transferred a lot of serfs. He extended his hand and counted with his fingers. Corn grass, corn fields, tulip, and the large number of seeds you traded, such as beets, turnips, onions, coriander, and so on, all need to be planted by serfs. I think we need to replenish at least 1,000 serfs. Without any farming tools, the method to cultivate wasteland was slash-and-burn cultivation. Farming was a very energy-consuming job. A lot of serfs were needed to maintain the normal growth of crops and vegetables. Without enough serfs, the fields could not be planted. If it were mechanized, then a dozen or so people would be able to plant all the fields in the flower town. Liszt often fantasized about leading the flower town into the farming mode of American farmers, with large machinery driving through the boundless farmland. However, it could only be a fantasy. Currently, the flower town did not even have a few shovels and hoes. Therefore, he did not force Gort to quickly expand the plantation. Then first come up with a plan, divide the fields, and wait for sufficient manpower before starting the planting. As you wish. At the logging site, more than 30 loggers were in groups of 2, chopping down trees with axes. It had to be said that the serfs, who worked hard all year round, had great strength and good efficiency. Riding on Black Dragon, Liszt slowly patrolled. On the other side, Marcus was leading the night squad, constantly picking up the chopped pine branches and dragging them to the 3 bonfires in the woods. The bonfires burned fiercely, forming a triangular shape to protect the logging site. Hunters were making traps around the bonfires. Occasionally, the cries of birds could be heard from the depths of the wood. There was no dangerous atmosphere, only a scene of bustling activity. However, Liszt did not relax in the slightest. The smoke mission's prompt was very clear: there would be a World of Warcraft attack on the logging site. It was just that he did not know when the attack would occur. World of Warcraft, huh? Since coming to the flower town, I have already killed 2. One was a flying dust dog that had just given birth and had yet to recover its strength, and the other was a winged peregrine falcon that was exhausted from fighting the fruit-stealing monkeys. However, there was no fierce battle between them. The only Windblade wolf that had a direct confrontation with the World of Warcraft was just a feint before fleeing into the Thorns Ridge. He was now somewhat looking forward to the upcoming World of Warcraft attack. This time, he did not know what kind of World of Warcraft he would encounter, whether there would be a battle, and whether he could kill another World of Warcraft. The taste of World of Warcraft meat was much better than that of ordinary beasts, and it was also nourished by magic power. Liszt loved it. The sun shone fiercely. There was no wind. Even under the shade of the trees, it did not feel very cool. Fire-attributed chi circulated in his meridians. His hand rested on the hilt of the red-blood sword, and his gaze passed over the mottled shadows on the ground. He felt his fighting spirit boiling. With his personal style, it would be very difficult for him to perform a knight's charge on the battlefield. If he wanted to display the heroic bearing of an aristocrat, he could probably only do so in World of Warcraft. With so many people around, ample preparation, and Marcus assisting him, wasn't this the best opportunity to show off? Hurry up and come to World of Warcraft, my longsword is already thirsty. Whoosh. He suddenly unsheathed half of the red-blood sword. He wanted to pull it out and play with it, but he felt that it was not serious enough and was about to put it back. But at this moment, through the crackling sound of burning pine branches, a slightly abrupt bang came from afar, quickly attracting his attention. Marcus, who was also patrolling the surroundings, apparently also noticed the movement and shouted, "Alert!" He drew his handgun and approached the source of the sound. List tightly grasped the hilt of the red-blood sword. The sapphire-blue pupils in his eyes rotated like a whirlpool. He had already cast magic eyes. Soon he saw faint traces of magic power in several bushes. After a slight identification, he recognized a total of 3 World of Warcraft. Chapter 68. Marcus could deal with a low-level World of Warcraft and find an opportunity to kill it, but if he blindly charged forward with 3, he would only be dismembered. Marcus didn't have time to think about how List knew there were 3 World of Warcraft and immediately reined in his horse to return. At the same time, he quickly inserted his spear back into the spear rack on his horse's back, took out his bow and arrows, nocked them, and shot 4 arrows in a row towards the bushes 50 meters away. The arrows all missed, but their effect was already apparent. Suddenly, a windblade wolf jumped out from a thicket and stared at Marcus with a gloomy gaze. It didn't easily attack, but just coldly looked at the logging team's serfs as they drew closer to the bonfire. Carl and the other retainer knight took out the dried smoke grass leaves distributed to them and were ready to throw them into the bonfire at any time. The smoke grass leaves would emit a strong stench and scare away the World of Warcraft. List rode Black Dragon and joined up with Marcus, confronting the gray windblade wolf. "Sir, are you sure there are 3 World of Warcraft?" "I'm sure." List held the red-blood sword, still not dispelling magic eyes. "There is one in the bushes to the left of this windblade wolf, and another one in the bushes to the right rear. It obviously wants to attract our attention and let the other 2 attack." Marcus once again nocked an arrow. "Wolves are cunning and cautious by nature, I'll force them out first." 2 arrows were shot, but there was no movement from the bushes. The situation should have been tense, but List suddenly wanted to laugh. These 3 windblade wolves were playing tricks with him. They thought they wouldn't be discovered if they hid in the bushes, but under the gaze of magic eyes, they simply had nowhere to hide. The one on the left, move 1 meter to the bottom left of the bushes. The one on the right rear, move 1.5 meters to the right. Marcus heard this. He once again pulled out an arrow. This time, it wasn't a double arrow, but a single arrow. He went straight to the bushes on the left. Poochie! Awo! The sound of flesh being torn apart was accompanied by the miserable cry of the windblade wolf. The shrubbery shook, and the windblade wolf, with an arrow stuck in its shoulder blade, fled with its tail between its legs. Very quickly, it escaped into the depths of the forest. On the other side, the windblade wolf that had attracted their attention also turned around and ran. Only the windblade wolves in the bushes to the right were still hiding, possibly wanting to launch a sneak attack. However, in the next moment, a sharp arrow grazed its back and flew away, giving it a fright. It no longer dared to hide and scuttled out of the bushes. Without a sound, it turned around and fled. In just a few short exchanges of arrows, the 3 windblade wolves had already disappeared without a trace, without even using the smoke grass. The mana I could no longer see any traces of magic. List summoned the smoke quest. Seeing that the content had been updated, he waved his hand with slight regret. The windblade wolves have completely escaped. Remove the alert and continue logging. Not a single World of Warcraft was left behind, nor was he able to display his elegance. However, it was good that the mission was completed. Mission completed. Reward, a small saltpeter mine. Is it a saltpeter mine? Metals and gems came from dragons. As for the other minerals, they were produced by the continent itself. Previously, List had complained that without saltpeter, ice could not be made, and that he could not even drink a mouthful of cold beer in the middle of summer. List had not expected that the reward would be a saltpeter mine. How considerate. However, isn't it too wasteful to use saltpeter to make ice? I remember that saltpeter is one of the formulas for gunpowder. He recalled the formula for gunpowder he learned in middle school physics: charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate saltpeter. Now that he had a source of saltpeter, unfortunately, he did not have a source of sulfur. Let's first use it to make ice. The weather is getting hotter and hotter. Without ice to cool down the temperature and cold beer, it is simply unbearable. List's thoughts revolved, and the smoke serpentines changed. Mission: the crisis of World of Warcraft's invasion has been resolved. It is time to go all out to cut down wood, widen the roads of the Thorns Ridge, bring the Flower Town back into the Coral Islands trade, and win opportunities for development. Reward: a new variety of mushrooms. A new variety of mushrooms. List immediately thought of the shiitake settlement. Is the shiitake settlement's shiitake shed going to grow a magic ingredient, just like the black tulip? Shiitake was a very important ingredient in aristocratic recipes. It was classified as a mushroom, and the people of this world called mushrooms abandoned sprite worms, meaning that they were plants abandoned by sprite worms, because they could not give birth to sprite worms. In this world, even a weed could give birth to a sprite worm. Only a mushroom could not give birth to a sprite worm. Therefore, it was very doubtful whether it was a plant or not. However, it had many kinds of magic ingredients, and only plants could give birth to magic ingredient. From this, it could be seen that it was a plant. In the end, there was no definite conclusion. List's knowledge told him that a mushroom was a kind of fungus. However, in this world, it was meaningless to know whether it was a fungus or a plant. This was not a world of science. Although it cannot give birth to sprite worms and cannot increase its output through supernatural forces, but as a mushroom, as long as the conditions are right, it can grow very quickly. If I can really get a new variety of magic ingredient mushrooms, then it would definitely be great news. It would be equivalent to the Flower Town having another specialty. The black tulip could originally be regarded as a specialty. However, he only had one tulip worm and could not expand the scale. Therefore, it was best to cooperate with the Tulip Castle. Magic ingredient mushrooms, on the other hand, did not need the help of sprite worms and could expand the scale of cultivation by itself. They were definitely an excellent specialty. Magic ingredient mushrooms alone might be able to attract an endless stream of caravans. At the very least, Levis and Liweiwei would not miss out on a new magic ingredient. For the sake of the Sky Knight's dream, they were determined to make a medicine jar. Cut down trees. During this period of time, I will come every day to supervise the cutting of trees. The road to the Thorns Ridge must be cleared by this morning. List made a decision excitedly. It was a scorching summer and the heat was unbearable. List had originally planned to return to the castle ahead of time. Now that he was in high spirits, he had Thomas go to the castle to pack some food and have a picnic at the logging site. This was also to guard against the Windblade wolves returning. The picnic had just been eaten. Suddenly, the sound of hooves came from the road not far away. Several knights were whistling as they galloped. Seemingly having seen the logging team, the knights went straight to the logging site. Karl's 4 retainer knights immediately went to greet them. Then, together with the knights, they arrived before List. Sir Baron. The knight in the lead was an acquaintance of List, Lord Loudon's knight. He was a captain of the Night Knights of the Tulip Castle. He saluted in a knight's salute. Loudon sends his regards. The last time Levis and the others came for the assimilation transaction, it was this Lord Loudon's knight. List returned the knight's salute. Sir Loudon, we meet again. What is the purpose of your visit this time? Chapter 69. Out of the Sea Festival. If not for List, he would have forgotten about it. The 2 most important festivals of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire were the New Year Festival and the departure to the Sea Festival. The New Year Festival was a custom of the continent. It celebrated the end of one year and the beginning of a new one. Basically, all the nobles and commoners of any country would celebrate the New Year Festival. The Voyage to the Seas Festival was a festival unique to the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. In order to celebrate the Sapphire family's first voyage to the seas, after losing the dragon-slaying war, the Sapphire family had no choice but to migrate from the continent to the archipelago and establish their own country. In order to whitewash the background of their failure, the day they set out to sea was promoted as the day they set sail to pursue their dreams. Commoners might prefer the New Year festival, which was a festival passed down through generations. However, the Festival of the Seas was an annual festival that the nobles of the archipelago country had to celebrate. Thank you, Sir Leyden, for taking the trouble to deliver the news. This is what I should do, Lord Baron. How are my grandmother, father, brother, sister, madam, and Lytton? Everything is fine. That's good. After chatting with Leyden about the current situation in Tulip Castle, Liszt found out that the Tulip fleet had yet to return. Unknowingly, he had already returned to the castle. Leyden and his group had not eaten lunch yet, so he immediately asked the kitchen to prepare lunch for them. Sir Baron, is the Flower Town going to chop down all the trees in the Thorns Ridge? Leyden asked the question that had been on his mind along the way. In the past 2 days, the logging team had already chopped out a large area of open space. There's a plan to kill them all and cut off World of Warcraft's habitat. However, they did not have enough manpower for the time being. We can only chop down the trees on both sides of the road and clear the area to reduce the risk of World of Warcraft's invasion. That's a good idea. World of Warcraft in the forest is a terrifying existence, while World of Warcraft in the wilderness is just a slightly stronger beast. A knight with a horse wouldn't be caught off guard by World of Warcraft in an open area. Even magic attacks could be dodged. Moreover, horses were extremely fast, and World of Warcraft might not be able to catch up. On the other hand, a knight could launch a charge in an open area, become one with the horse, and use all kinds of secret chi technique. They maintained the etiquette and courtesy between nobles. Leyden and the others took their leave after lunch. Liszt, on the other hand, needed to make arrangements. Mr. Carter, the Tulip family will be coming to the castle to celebrate the Going Out to the Sea festival with me in 3 days. I'm not very keen on such a noisy occasion, so I'll leave it to you to make the arrangements. Don't worry, master. When I was young, I participated in Tulip Castle's seafaring festival many times. The scene of Steward Lewis hosting the festival banquet is deeply engraved in my mind. Now, the castle has an endless supply of seafood and World of Warcraft meat. Apart from the lack of alcohol, we can definitely hold a perfect banquet. I remember that there is a winemaker among the new serfs? Yes, his name is Frank Distiller, but he only knows how to brew fruit wine. He doesn't know how to brew white wine, red wine, or beer. Besides, we don't have hop. Liszt frowned. We don't have any beer with hops? There is still half a barrel hidden in the cellar. This is the last bit of enjoyment you have, master. I'm a bit reluctant to take it out, Carter said regretfully. In his mind, Liszt was already the most important person. Then don't take it out. Liszt blinked. Carter replied with a knowing smile. I think so too. Unfortunately, when Leyden left, I forgot to ask him to pass on a few words to Levis and have Levis help me purchase a batch of alcohol and ingredients. So in the end, it's still because of the bad road. Otherwise, the gold coins in the castle would have been spent and not left to rot. Perhaps you could ask Mr. Marcus to pass on the message? No, Teacher Marcus has more important things to do. He needs to look after the logging team and train the night squad. I don't think it's a bad thing to let Sir Father see the Flower Town's poverty during the Going Out to the Sea festival. Wouldn't the Count's conscience hurt when he saw that the Flower Town didn't even have hops? Carter said with a smile. Master, you are getting more and more free and easy. Liszt smiled slightly. I recently read a night novel. There is a short poem in it. If life deceives you, don't be sad, don't be impatient. Melancholy days need to be calm. Believe, happy days will come. The heart is always yearning for the future. The present is often melancholy. Everything is fleeting, everything will pass. and the past will become a kind of nostalgia. The Count didn't attach much importance to his third son, Liszt, as it wasn't a big deal. Therefore, although life was sometimes very shabby and poverty-stricken, the current Liszt was still optimistic. Compared to the majority of commoners and lesser aristocrats, life in the flower town was already very perfect. Being able to eat white bread every day was an unattainable dream for many people. Over the next few days, the construction of the fief was still in full swing. Roads were repaired, trees were cut, and houses were built in the oyster settlement. The serfs, armed with the copper coins paid by Liszt, were full of energy. Even the hot weather couldn't dampen their enthusiasm. The castle was also in full swing. The butler Carter was busy instructing the servants to clean the inside and outside and decorate the castle. The cook Abby Ladle, with her loud voice, ordered the 2 kitchen maids, Irene and little Lily, around all day long, busying themselves with all kinds of ingredients. Marcus, with the night squad, guarded the logging team while practicing the foundation of Chi course. Gort, Isaiah, and Blair were also working earnestly. Only Liszt was a bit vexed. He couldn't find the location of the super-small saltpeter mine. The mission had been completed, but the saltpeter mine reward had yet to be discovered. No one had reported to him that an unusual stone had been found somewhere, nor was there any unusual situation worthy of his attention. For 3 days in a row there was no clue, leaving Liszt at a loss. It wasn't that the saltpeter mine was of great value. Apart from using it to make ice for the time being, he didn't know what use saltpeter could be used for. Rather, the situation was not very optimistic, making him worry that something had gone wrong with the smoke mission. The previous mission rewards had been delivered to him on the same day. Could it be that my cheat is about to leave me? At night, lying in bed, looking at the Mushroom Settlement's mission, which was still hanging, Liszt was very worried. Fortunately, the worry only lasted until the 4th day. On this day, after Gort and the logging team entered the Thorns Ridge to work, another team followed them. They were the gravel transportation team. They were responsible for crushing the stones in the Thorns Ridge and then transporting them to both sides of the road to pave the road. While they were constantly looking for stones to smash, they suddenly discovered a pile of rubble embedded in the ground, accompanied by a large amount of white crystal-like substance. At first, they thought that it was salt. Salt was very important in daily life, so the serfs were very happy. Sir Lord would reward them for getting something good. But after a simple taste, they discovered that the white substance didn't have the slightest saltiness. On the contrary, it was a bit bitter. Despite this, they still scraped a lot of the white substance and gave it to Gort for verification. Gort couldn't distinguish it, so he explained the situation to Liszt. Chapter 70. When dissolved in water, saltpeter would absorb a lot of heat. This was the principle behind making ice with saltpeter. Thanks to the experience of reading novels in the past, Liszt knew a lot of such common knowledge. He also knew that saltpeter could be reused. Saltpeter is a magical substance. It can dissolve in water and make the water very cold until it freezes. Liszt directed the servant to pour the white powder into the basin. Then, the powder gradually melted. Tom put his finger into the water and shouted in surprise, "Master, master, the water really turned cold, it's so cold." Gort pushed Tom away, curious and hesitant. Finally, he put his finger in. "It's indeed much colder than before." "Liszt, is this the means of a magician? I once saw a magician who was good at ice magic. He always made a lot of ice in the summer to make money." However, after a moment of silence, the water only cooled a little, but did not freeze. "Liszt, why didn't it turn into ice?" "Teacher Gort, a little powder is not enough to make ice with saltpeter. Now, it only proves that it is indeed saltpeter." Liszt smiled faintly. "Then, while you are crushing the rocks, collect all the saltpeter and send it into the castle. Don't miss a single one." Alright, I look forward to the moment when you make ice. Having ice in the summer is what nobles should enjoy. Tomorrow was the sailing festival, and the castle would host a banquet. At night, looking at the amount of saltpeter powder collected in a day, which was enough to fill a barrel, Liszt excitedly instructed the servants to start making real saltpeter ice. When dissolved in water, the saltpeter would release heat and turn water into ice. However, the ice water that directly melted the saltpeter was poisonous, so a vat and a copper basin with good thermal conductivity were needed. The vat was filled with water, the copper basin was also filled with water, and the copper basin was then placed into the vat. The saltpeter was poured into the vat and waited for it to absorb heat, turning the water into ice. Because there was enough saltpeter powder, the heat absorption effect was very strong. Within a moment, the water in the vat began to slowly freeze, and after a while, even the water in the copper basin began to freeze. It's frozen. It really froze. What a magical scene. This is the work of the legendary alchemists. Marcus, Gort, Isaiah, and Blair, who were watching from the side, were all amazed. In their impression, there was only ice in winter. The nobles had to build an ice house to enjoy the cool of ice in summer. However, an ice cellar was a luxury. Only a wealthy lord could organize a large team of ice miners to dig ice from rivers and lakes in winter. A fallen aristocrat like Gort could only rub a few ice cubes in the Tulip Castle every year to have a taste. Marcus, Blair, and Isaiah weren't even qualified to taste Xiaobing. Liszt was equally excited. He had heard of saltpeter making ice, but it was his first time making it himself. Seeing water turn into ice with his own eyes was a very shocking feeling. "Master, it's frozen." Thomas's eyes lit up as he looked at the vat. "Take the ice." Liszt nodded, maintaining a reserved aristocratic smile on his face, calm and dignified. "Cut the ice into small pieces. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, everyone can get a small piece of ice." Carter whispered, "Master, the ice is too expensive. The servants don't need it, right?" "It doesn't matter, Mr. Carter. Just do as I say." "Yes, master. On behalf of all the servants, I express my most sincere respect for your generosity." Carter bowed. Meeting a generous aristocratic master was indeed the servant's luck. After saying that, he directed Thomas to carry the copper basin of ice cubes into the kitchen and began to cut them. Liszt then called Tom. "Store this vat of ice water. When the sun rises tomorrow, take it out to dry. Don't waste a drop." Gort was puzzled. "Liszt, what's the meaning of this? The ice can be used, why do we need to dry it?" "Saltpeter directly melts the condensed ice. Of course it can be used, but it can't be eaten. Drying it in the sun will turn it into saltpeter, and then repeatedly use it to make ice." "Is saltpeter really so magical?" "It's far more magical than you think." Liszt thought to himself. If he could find sulfur, he would dare to make gunpowder right now. Compared to gunpowder was technically not an explosive, but it was still a highly flammable explosive. It was suitable for making some soil bombs, and its power was at least not weaker than the magic released by low-level World of Warcraft. If used in a low-level battle, it would have a surprising effect. Of course, in a world with dragons, elves and magic, gunpowder had no decisive advantage. The dishes at the banquet were not plentiful. Liszt could not bear to entertain Gort and the others with lavish meals every day. The castle supplies were his personal guarantee for a luxurious life. The wine was also relatively poor. It was sour beer without hops. But the atmosphere at the banquet was high because everyone had a few ice cubes in their cup. The ice cubes melted, making the whole cup of beer cold. After drinking it, one's whole body instantly became cool and bright. In this increasingly hot weather, it was definitely the best enjoyment. "Liszt, I propose, cheers for the cold beer." Gort happily raised his cup. Liszt raised his cup in response. "Then for the cold beer, cheers." "Cheers." Gulp, gulp. The sound of beer being gulped down could be heard from the dining table. The kitchen. At the dining table, Irene kept fiddling with the ice cubes on the plate with a spoon, making a clattering sound. Abby Ladle couldn't help but scold. Irene, stop making unpleasant sounds. Master rewarded you with ice cubes, hurry up and eat them. Compared to eating ice cubes, I prefer to watch them melt. Mrs. Abby, don't you think the temperature in the kitchen has dropped today? Irene's forefingers continued to fiddle with the ice cubes and looked at Lily Bathtub in the next seat. Little Lily, do you feel it? Of course, there are ice cubes on each of our plates. After saying that, little Lily stuck out her tongue and licked the ice cubes on the spoon. She was reluctant to eat them all at once. The ice cubes had no taste, but they were cool and comfortable, making the heat of the whole body subside. Abby angrily said, Little Lily, I don't allow you to talk to Irene while eating. Your clumsy and rude table manners will only bring shame to the kitchen. Cough, cough. Butler Carter forcefully bit the ice cubes in his mouth. He was already in his 50s, but his teeth were still very good. Mrs. Abby, they are still children. It is a bit rude to allow them to eat. Mr. Carter, it's not that I don't listen to your orders, but you shouldn't indulge them. They will become lawless. Being clumsy is already disappointing enough. If they can't even learn a little etiquette, they will stay in the kitchen for the rest of their lives, unable to become maids upstairs. Abby seriously said. Carter and Emerson glanced at each other. They both knew that Abby was a good person with a hard mouth but a soft heart. However, Irene was obviously not convinced. Mrs. Abby, I don't want to go upstairs. It's not comfortable upstairs. I have to be careful not to leave even a footprint. I want to be a cook in the future. I like to work in the kitchen. You can give up on that idea. Abby suddenly exploded. With me in the kitchen, you will never become a cook. Little girl, remember, don't offend me. But you will grow old one day. Chapter 71. Before dawn, the voice of the butler Carter continued to appear upstairs and downstairs in the castle. Tom, cheer up! Thomas, prepare the Lord's best holiday suit. Frack Abier, don't make any mistakes. Mrs. Morrison, there is dust on the window on the second floor, let the maid clean it as soon as possible. We can't leave the impression of laziness on the upcoming distinguished guests. God, why did the kitchen take out the oysters to dry? Quickly take them away. No, 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 Irene, absolutely not today. I need to see the castle's water tank overflow, but Jessie, you don't have to fetch water, John and Parker will do it. You need to quickly inspect all the cordyceps, even if it is a holiday, we can't ignore the most important things. Don't take the whole thing out to dry, you should break it, pieces of crushed ice are easier to dry. Carter took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat on his head. Today was really busy. He still had a lot of expensive crystal tableware to wipe, but he had to explain the trivial matters first. He looked at the new servant Jim, who had just arrived in the castle, struggling to move the water tank that made the ice yesterday to the sun. He couldn't help but tell the other party to use his brain. Jim was tall and smart, but inexperienced. When he heard Carter's words, he immediately apologized. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, I didn't think of this. I will break the ice now and put it in a few buckets and basins. Don't spill it, it's all saltpeter. The Lord specifically ordered that it is very valuable. Please rest assured, Mr. Carter. After patrolling around the castle, Carter went to the second floor, just in time to see Thomas holding the frack Abier and entering List's bedroom. He also knocked on the door and went in. Master, you woke up very early today. With the help of Thomas, List put on the clothes he hated, as well as the particularly uncomfortable disc-shaped pleated collar laugh. His mood was not very good for a moment. The castle is so noisy, it's a bit difficult for me to fall asleep. Carter immediately bowed, his expression a little uneasy. I'm sorry, it's my fault for disturbing you, master. List was just a little angry when he woke up, but when he saw Carter apologize, His anger quickly subsided. He shouldn't have let this loyal old man bear this small burden. This has nothing to do with you, Mr. Carter. Don't blame yourself. Today is the sailing festival, so I have to get up early. Carter breathed a sigh of relief. Thomas squinted at him, a little disappointed. He was looking forward to seeing the master scold the butler. After putting on his clothes, List ate a simple breakfast and rode on Fire Dragon, ready to patrol around the town. Today was a festival. Even if only the nobles would celebrate it, he still had to enjoy the support and compliments of his subjects. At this moment, he had already seen Gort, who was also dressed splendidly. There were also Marcus, Blair, and Isaiah, who were dressed in relatively grand attire. The three of them were not nobles with titles yet. "Sir Baron, Gort offers his holiday greetings to you." "Sir Marcus, Isaiah offers his holiday greetings to you." "Sir Baron, Isaiah offers his holiday greetings to you." "Sir Baron, Blair offers his holiday greetings to you." The four of them greeted List in turn, meticulously displaying aristocratic etiquette. List also responded with aristocratic etiquette. "Happy holidays." Then came his 4 retainer knight, as well as 12 quasi-retainer knight, one after another, saluting and offering their holiday greetings to him. Finally, the castle servants put down their work and, under Carter's lead, also offered their holiday greetings. When he took Gort and the others, as well as the retainer knight, to patrol the town. On both sides of the road came a variety of "Sir Lord, XXX offers his holiday greetings to you." The freedmen knelt on one knee, and the serfs knelt on both knees. Under such etiquette, the authority of the aristocracy was continuously consolidated and deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. When the commoners were already accustomed to kneeling, the foundation of the rule would become unbreakable. "My lord, good news." While patrolling the tomato settlement, List saw Jesse Ricewater. The former assistant serving man had been promoted to serving man, receiving a daily wage of 2 copper coins. "Jesse, what's the good news?" "I just checked the tomato settlement's tomato sprite worm stock and discovered that the tomato sprite worm has already been born." "Is that so? This is indeed good news." List was very happy. The castle's 7th sprite worm had already arrived. List led the patrolling team to John Shoulderpole's tomato field. The tomato sprite worm stalk in the middle was clearly very tall, bearing red tomatoes. On one of the small yellow flowers, a red, chubby sprite worm lazily basked in the sun. John Shoulderpole nervously looked at the sprite worm from the side. He was obliged to protect the sprite worm on behalf of the Lord, to prevent it from being harmed by anything and to prevent it from being contracted by anyone. Only lords were qualified to contract sprite worms. Only those who possessed battle chi and magic could establish a contract with him. "Sir Lord, John Shoulderpole offers you his holiday greetings." "Happy holiday, John." List gave a simple greeting, then walked in front of the tomato sprite worm and sprinkled a bit of jade powder to attract it. Next, he smeared a bit of jade powder on his finger and extended his finger toward the little fellow. Chi circulated on his fingertip, magic power and the charm of the jade powder were unleashed together, and the tomato sprite worm bit down without hesitation. A feeling of telepathy flashed past. The tomato sprite worm had already established a contract with List. Gort looked at the tomato sprite worm enviously and said with a smile, "Today is truly a joyous day. The tomato sprite worm seems to have chosen today to be born. I offer you my holiday greetings, List." If his fief had also had a sprite worm, perhaps it would not have ended up going bankrupt. "It is a smart sprite worm, I can feel it." List smiled, then turned to John Shoulderpole and said, "John, the tomato field where the worm stalk grows will still be cultivated by you. Remember not to harm the worm stalk, it is the most important existence in the tomato settlement." "Sir Lord, please rest assured, John is willing to give up his life to protect it." He spoke very excitedly. The tomato fields near the wormstalk were all high-yielding and high-quality tomatoes, which meant that he could keep enough tomatoes after paying taxes. For him, ever since Liszt rewarded him with a nalda, his affluent life had begun to take off. It will get better and better in the future. I want to plant tomatoes for Sir Lord for a lifetime. Chapter 72. The Count's caravan appeared in the Thorns Ridge at around 10 o'clock in the morning. Learning from the lesson of being discovered when the caravan arrived not far from the castle last time, the patrol team had been loitering around the Thorns Ridge road. Currently, a large number of trees had been cut down on both sides of the road. The logs had yet to be transported away and were laid flat on the ground, looking like a floor. This undoubtedly provided the humans with a very good field of vision and reduced the risk of World of Warcraft invasion. But this wasn't the end, the logging work still hadn't been completed. Additionally, Liszt was preparing to erect 2 guardrails to cut off World of Warcraft's route. Although the wooden guardrails had zero effect on World of Warcraft was still the brain of the beast. Seeing the guardrails blocking the way, the beast would most likely turn around and not destroy the guardrails. With the patrol team's notification, Liszt led Gort and the others to welcome this huge caravan. There were only 5 carriages, but an entire knight caravan. Neatly dressed and brightly armed, this knight caravan had initially followed the Count on his conquests on the continent. Many knights were conferred nobles due to their military exploits and went to their fiefs to enjoy the good life of the rentier class. Then, another batch of Knight Academy novices joined in, maintaining the integrity of the orders of chivalry. The Count didn't ride in a carriage. He rode on his beloved black leopard horse. He didn't even wear a festive costume and instead wore a full body armor. Liszt felt that he deliberately wore a military uniform in order to avoid wearing the fracabue that could give people rash, especially the disc-like Raff. In the summer, Raff wasn't that friendly to people. No one would like to wear a scarf in the summer. Lord Father, Liszt offers his holiday greetings to you. The proper aristocratic etiquette still needed to be carried out. Happy holidays! After Lee William responded, he looked at the castle not far away and sighed with emotion. It has been more than 10 years, but this small castle still hasn't changed much. There's no need to say hello, let's go directly to the castle. The weather outside is too hot, your grandmother needs to cool off early. All right. Liszt led the way. A moment later, the caravan stopped at the castle gate. Under Carter's lead, all the servants stood on the left and right sides to welcome the distinguished guests. Gort stepped forward in an exaggerated manner. My Lord Count, Gort is so excited to see you. You are even more elegant than you were a few months ago. Even though my do-chi has weakened, I can still feel the powerful pressure emanating from your body. The pressure from the Sky Knight. Lee William enjoyed such flattery very much, saying with a smile, Gort, your complexion is even more rosy. How is life in the Flower Town? Gort shook his clothes and bowed deeply. I, Gort, offer you my holiday greetings. Life in the Flower Town is full of vitality. I enjoy working here. Just as he spoke, Madame Penelope's voice came from behind. There is so much dust on the way, I need water to clean it. Going on such a long journey is like going through a nightmare. I want to end it, yet I have to bite the bullet and continue. Grandmother, Liszt offers you my holiday greetings. Happy holidays! Madame Penelope, supported by a maid, entered the castle. She sized it up a few times. It must have been hard for you to live in the countryside and suffer from such a poverty-stricken life. The only thing worth envying is probably the smell of this small house, the smell of the countryside. Saying that, she added, I feel more comfortable than the smell of the Tulip Castle. If you feel comfortable, then you might as well stay here for a few more days. That won't do. The servants don't know how to take care of my flowers. I will go crazy if I don't see them for a day. Following behind Madame Penelope was a middle-aged woman dressed in jewels. She wore a tall lady's hat covered with all kinds of feathers. The hat was originally called the Flying Bird Hat. The feathers symbolized the sky, and only the wives of the Sky Knight could wear it. Later on, it became popular. All aristocratic women would wear all kinds of exaggerated and exotic hats during the holidays. In addition to the conspicuous hat, the woman also gave off a vixen aura, especially her eyes. Liszt, who had inherited the memories of his predecessor, had the most profound impression of this pair of eyes. At that time, Liszt, he always felt that this pair of eyes was secretly observing him at any time, yet not revealing it. But when she smiled, it had the sweet flavor of a girl next door. But now, when Liszt looked at this pair of eyes again, it was very easy to conclude that this was a pair of fox eyes. They were slightly long and narrow, with the corners of their eyes raised and curved into crescent moons when they smiled. "Madam, Liszt offers you his holiday greetings." With a faint smile on his face, he routinely displayed the impeccable aristocratic etiquette. Even if he was disgusted, his expression was still as warm as a spring breeze. "Happy holidays, Liszt. You have grown taller." The middle-aged woman responded with a smile. She was the current Countess Marie Loa. She was also holding a very tender youngster's hand. The youngster was obviously dismissive of the castle's environment. He reluctantly put on a bit of superficial respect and performed the etiquette. "Brother Liszt, Lytton offers you his holiday greetings." "Happy holidays." Liszt responded faintly and continued to say to Madame Marie, "Madam, please take Lytton into the castle to rest. I will go and greet my brother, sister, as well as Sir Layton." It was not the first time that Levis and Li Weiwei had come to the Flower Town. Therefore, after greeting each other and entering the castle, Liszt greeted the aristocrats who came with the convoy. These aristocrats were all minor aristocrats who held positions in Tulip Castle. Most of them were lords and knights. There was also a baron, the captain of the Knight of Tulip Castle, Mickey. The head of the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry was Lee William. The captain, Mickey, was responsible for the training of the Orders of Chivalry and the safety of Tulip Castle. He could be regarded as the de facto head of the regiment. After exchanging pleasantries, the castle became even more lively. Because there were too many people, with a large number of aristocrats upstairs and an even larger number of knights downstairs, 15 servants were not enough. Fortunately, the Count and his party had brought a lot of servants, as well as a lot of food and drinks. They probably understood that there was nothing in the countryside. They had come here to have a picnic. As the butler, Carter was naturally the leader of all the servants, even if Tulip Castle's deputy butler, Silva, was among them. "Carter, if there is not enough food in the castle, then don't bother. Master has brought enough food from Tulip Castle for a few days." Silva was younger than Carter. His swallow-tailed coat was just right. Standing among the servants, he looked like a noble aristocrat. Carter used to be just the butler of the castle. When dealing with Silva, the deputy butler, he needed to listen to the other party's instructions. But now, he represented Liszt. Chapter 73. Black Tulip, It's So Beautiful. Lee William swayed the unique black tulip, his face full of softness. The rise of the family relied on tulip, so he naturally had a unique love for tulip. Madame Penelope was also swaying the purple-black flowers. Having a new kind of magic ingredient, and a tulip at that, is a sign of the family's continued prosperity. I originally thought that Liszt was not a lucky person, but now it seems that he is the luckiest one in the tulip family. Black tulip should be vigorously promoted for the family, Madame Marie said casually. Lytton followed behind Madame Marie and said with a trace of innocence, "It's so beautiful, father. Can I also have a black tulip? I want to plant it on my bedroom window-sill and see it every day." "There will be a chance, Lytton." Levis directly interrupted Lytton's words, looked at the picked capsules, and asked Liszt, A batch of seeds has already been picked. There are a total of 35 mature capsules, each with about 30 seed. I think it should be able to be planted on a large scale within half a year if I hand it over to Xiangxiang to cultivate. Of course, Xiangxiang's speed in planting tulip is the best among the greater elves. I'll give you the seeds later. Good. The two of them simply chatted for a while before deciding on the planting of the black tulip. They did not give the others any leeway to interrupt. The two brothers were of the same opinion. They could bring Li Weiwei along, but they would absolutely not bring Litten. They were not raised by the same mother, so naturally they were not on the same page. The Count looked at Madame Marie and Litten. He then looked at Liszt, who was already much taller than himself, and ultimately said nothing. Madame Penelope whispered in Li Weiwei's ear, "The two boys already have their own opinions. Look at Li William's face, it's really delightful." Although it was a whisper, however, everyone was gathered together, so there was no need to keep it a secret. Li William could only pretend that he didn't hear anything. He turned to Liszt and said, "The flower farm is in ruins. When I discovered the tulip here, I planted a sea of tulip flowers. I hope you can recreate the scene from back then. Reviving the flower farm has always been in my plans. I can see that you really do understand how to be a qualified lord. The flower town exudes a thriving atmosphere. I hope that it will continue." After seeing the black tulip, the group returned to the castle as it was too hot. On the horse field outside the castle, Li William saw Black Dragon. As a sky knight, he had a very good eye for horses. With just a glance, he could tell that Black Dragon was more spirited than his black leopard horse. "What lineage does it have?" "I don't know." Liszt didn't say anything about the dragon's bloodline. Once he did, the Count would definitely snatch Black Dragon away. Dragon horses were of great importance to aristocrats. It might be a mid-level World of Warcraft bloodline. If you can breed a herd of similarly spirited horses, then I will purchase a batch from you to replace the Orders of Chivalry's mounts. That might take a long time. Li William looked at Liszt with a touch of profound meaning in his eyes. Don't be impatient, time is on your side. In the castle, the servants had already prepared the banquet. After a bit of washing, the formal banquet began. The male servants brought out the dishes one by one and placed them in front of each noble guest. Carter gave his all to command the servants in an orderly manner. The food brought by the Count didn't cause any reaction. It was what they often ate. However, as the seafood was served, the originally dull banquet reached a climax. Many of the seemingly delicious dishes were things they had never eaten before. "What is this?" Under the guidance of the maid, Madame Penelope dug the clam out of its shell and took a bite. It was fresh, smooth. A fragrance completely different from that of continental dishes bloomed on her taste bud. It's very delicious. It's so soft that I almost don't need to use my teeth. Clams are a kind of seafood that is abundant on the coast. The meat is very delicious. Not only is it very tasty, but it can also prevent the occurrence of some diseases. Li Weiwei imitated the maid and peeled a mantis shrimp. "What is this?" As the host, Liszt continued to explain. "Mantis shrimp, it might be more interesting to call it mantis shrimp. Its taste is fresh, sweet, tender and soft. It is not inferior to the Longtaro Castle's rock lobster. Unfortunately, it is already summer. If it was spring, the mantis shrimp's spawning season, its taste would be even more tender and delicious." "So, they are all seafood?" "Yes. The flower town doesn't have any specialty product. If you want to improve the recipe, you can only look at the East Coast's Azure Wave Sea. Fortunately, there are countless delicious seafood waiting to be developed." Seafood was an important source of food. Currently, not too many aristocrats had paid attention to this. After today's banquet, the Coral Island might usher in a craze for seafood development. Of course, it might not. In the eyes of the aristocrats, the sea was far less important than the land. Sometimes, it wasn't one's vision that restricted development. Rather, it was inertia. Liszt discovered this from everyone's endless praises for the seafood. The Count and the others indeed had a very high evaluation of the seafood. However, they hoped to buy seafood from the flower town instead of catching it themselves. Perhaps, in their opinion, they shouldn't waste the serfs who farmed to become fishermen. Of course, I can provide seafood for Tulip Castle. In fact, as you can see, I am in the process of opening the road to the Thorns Ridge. Once it is open, I will form a caravan from the flower town to travel to and from the Coral City. I will sell the goods produced by the flower town on a regular basis. The Count took a sip of red wine and nodded, saying, "Once the restrictions of the Thorns Ridge are lifted, the flower town might also be able to develop into a wealthy town. Like your sister, train a group of knights. The glory of aristocracy is always fought for on horseback." After the seafood, another delicacy was served. It was the wind peregrine falcon jerky. This was also the last main course. Using the World of Warcraft jerky as the end of the main course was enough to be the finale. No one complained as they watched the guests eat happily. As the butler, Carter stood upright next to the banquet, his heart full of pride. Everyone thought that the flower town was a barren and shabby town, that the lord ate poor food and lived a simple life. However, the banquet before him was enough to show the flower town's wealth. Wealthy aristocrats were respectable aristocrats. The hard work of the servants under him set off the castle's aristocratic temperament. He believed that no one would think that Liszt was a countryside baron anymore. Here, the flower town was a place blessed by the glory of the night. "Master, can we serve the dessert? Mrs. Abbey has already made enough ice cream." Chapter 74. The banquet was a success. The dessert ice cream was a good way to soothe the heat during the meal. This bit of ice cream used up all the ice in the kitchen. Liszt originally thought that the Count's people would ask why the flower town could also produce ice cube. Unexpectedly, no one asked. Probably because they were used to using ice in Tulip Castle, they simply didn't notice that there should be no ice here. After the meal, the aristocrats chatted. Liszt let Gort greet them on his behalf, while he and Levis went to the study. "Brother, how many days before the Tulip fleet returns?" According to the usual schedule, it should return to the Coral City's pier in about a week. Levis took out a cigar and lit it. "You want to talk about the slave trade?" "Yes, the next time the Tulip fleet goes to sea to trade. I hope that you can help me buy a batch of serfs." "Sure, but how much can you pay? 10 silver coins for a serf?" That was the price in the past. Nowadays, there is no fighting in the Grand Duchy, so the sale of serfs is rare and very difficult to find. But a while ago, I also heard that the lord of the small Kerchief Island was killed by pirates and lost his fief. The Sapphire Grand Duke is very angry about this and has already spread the news to the major fiefs, asking for assistance in besieging the pirates. However, after the pirates destroyed the small Kerchief Island, they disappeared without a trace. Some people think that this is not a pirate, but a lord in disguise. The Big Kerchief Island has offered a reward of 300 gold coins for clues about the pirate. Levis gave a brief account of the repercussions of the small Kerchief Island encountering the pirates, before continuing. "However, apart from this, the Grand Duchy is calm. The slave trade needs to be further away, preferably at the border between the Eagle Kingdom and the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Name a price. If I can accept it, then I will agree. 20 silver coins for a serf. It cannot be lower than this price. Otherwise, I will not be able to make a profit." Levis gave his price. "Another thing, if the number of serfs is too large, then I need to pay the gold coins now. Otherwise, I will not be able to explain it to my father." Liszt thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. 100 gold coins, help me bring back 500 serfs. How refreshing. I have a small request. These 500 serfs should be mainly young people. Buy more female serfs. In addition, if there are serfs with skills, buy them first. You mean blacksmiths, tailors, cobblers, and such serfs? This won't be easy. Craftsmen are mostly freedmen, and the laws of every country protect freedmen. It's very difficult to sell them like serfs at will. Every aspect of a city's operation was inseparable from freedmen, so the laws of the country protected them. Liszt clenched his teeth. I will add another 20 gold coins. Among the 500 serfs, at least 100 are craftsmen. Sure. He painfully counted 120 golden naldas to Levis. Looking at his shriveled wallet, Liszt felt a little melancholy. Originally, he had around 150 gold coins, but as he continued to pay the wages of the civilians, he had spent a lot of gold coins. Now there were only 16 gold coins left in the wallet, which could dry up at any time. Fortunately, the passage to the Thorns Ridge was about to be opened. So long as the caravan was established, the Flower Town seafood could be sold to the Coral City. He believed that the delicious seafood could create a good fortune for him. After digesting, the Count's convoy began to return. Liszt presented a batch of oysters and other seafood. This decision was made after Carter told him that the Count had brought a lot of food. Courtesy demanded reciprocity. When the convoy left the Flower Town, the castle regained its tranquility. Although there were a lot of plates, wine glasses, and other things that needed to be cleaned up, and the small garden outside the castle was trampled out of shape by the night. But all of this, Carter could organize the servants to slowly clean it up without any pressure. There were 15 servants in the castle, which was enough. Teacher Gort, the festival is about to end. We need to free ourselves from the festive atmosphere. The town's construction progress cannot be stopped. Continue to expand the logging and gravel teams, as well as the fence construction teams, and strive to open the passage as soon as possible. Gort still wanted to continue, as you wish. At the banquet, he was like a fish in water, talking and laughing wittily with the Count. He had not had such a good time in many years. Over the next few days, besides supervising the logging work, Liszt also paid attention to another matter: the training of the fruit-stealing monkeys. At first, 7 fruit-stealing monkeys were caught alive, but they had all survived and recovered. However, 2 of them were lame, and it was not possible for them to climb trees. The remaining 5 were given to the town's hunters for training. Ropes, whips, and fruits were used together. Very soon, the unruly fruit-stealing monkeys were tamed. They climbed trees and entered cages. 3 female monkeys and 4 male monkeys. I believe that in the second half of the year, there will be 10 fruit-stealing monkeys. Monkeys generally gave birth to 2 babies a year, but each one usually gave birth to 1 baby. Liszt looked at the fruit-stealing monkeys that were becoming more and more obedient and was very satisfied. Without the fruit-stealing monkeys' destruction, this year's fragrant coconuts can ripen. I believe that in 1 or 2 months we will be able to drink fresh and sweet coconut juice. Fragrant coconuts didn't have a seasonal pattern. Except for winter, they would continuously bear fruit in other seasons. The Coral City does not seem to have fragrant coconuts for sale. Perhaps they will become a major specialty of the Flower Town. Unfortunately, no fragrant coconut sprite worm has been bred. While he was outlining the future of the fragrant coconut tree, the hunters had already begun to train the fruit-stealing monkeys to pick the fruits. The fake fruits were tied to branches for the fruit-stealing monkeys to pick. If they picked the fruits, they would be rewarded with a peanut. If they didn't pick the fruits, they would be whipped. The fruit-stealing monkeys could not run away due to the ropes tied around their neck. If they dared to run, they would be whipped. Remember, animals can also bear grudges and throw tantrums. As long as they work diligently, do not whip them at will. If I find out that you have whipped the fruit-stealing monkeys for no reason, then I will whip you. Liszt emphasized with a serious expression. He did not want the fruit-stealing monkeys to rebel in the future and smash a few fruit farmers to death. Sir Lord, please rest assured. We will not forget what you have instructed us to do. The part-time hunters understood that they would henceforth change from farmers to fruit farmers. They were all elated to have the fruit-stealing monkeys work. If it was not for training, List would be reluctant to whip them. For fruit farmers, the fruit-stealing monkeys were like knights' horses. After saying goodbye to the fruit-stealing monkeys, List returned to the castle and called over the few merchants among the new serfs. Old Grandette, Sherlock, Harpagon, you are merchants on the Smallkerchief Island? List repeated his question. Yes, Sir Lord. Is there a merchant on the Smallkerchief Island called Plushkin? Old Grandette replied. Sir Lord, there are only 3 of us who specialize in peddling small goods on the Smallkerchief Island. Moreover, I know the names of everyone in the city, but there is no one called Plushkin. Chapter 75. The ice cream pushed the festive banquet to its climax and soothed the heat brought about by the hot weather. However, although the banquet was over, the aristocrats who were lying on their chairs to digest their food were still discussing ice cream. Li Weiwei was the most enthusiastic among them. She had already fallen deeply in love with the taste of ice cream. List, tell me, how do you make ice cream? Let Mrs. Abby tell you. I just put forward an idea. Mrs. Abby completed the rest of the step. List had no intention of keeping it a secret. If he could produce ice on a large scale, then the ice cream recipe must be kept safe as a means of making money. However, there was no way to produce ice on a large scale, and there was no way to produce ice cream on a large scale. It was even more impossible to transport it over long distances for sale. It was useless to keep the recipe in his hands. Of course, blackmailing Li Weiwei was still necessary. I will only tell you the ice cream recipe, and you are not allowed to disclose it to others. In addition, as a fair deal, you can't take my things for free, right? What do you want? Pig iron or wrought iron? 100 kilograms of pig iron. I can only give you this much. If you want more, I would rather not have the ice cream recipe. Okay. List understood the limits. If he gave it away for free, it would be blind generosity. Maybe the other party would treat him as a fool. If he was too ruthless, it would not be good. After all, they were blood-related siblings and could help each other. After negotiating this small deal, he suddenly felt a little emotional. He remembered his younger self. It was on Earth. In order to win the favor of the girl he admired, he made ice cream by hand and gave it to her. Although he failed to win the heart of the beauty, he learned the craft of making ice cream. Now it seemed that it was not in vain. It would be great if I could make ice on a large scale. Making ice cream is still troublesome. If I could make popsicles directly, I would definitely make a fortune. Even if I could make ice directly, I would still make a fortune. The ice cream recipe was sold to Li Weiwei. However, when it came to Levis, he directly gave it to the other party. Brother, how many days before the Tulip Fleet returns? According to the usual time, it will return to the Coral City dock in about a week. Levis took out a cigar and lit it. Do you want to talk about the slave trade? Yes, the next time the Tulip Fleet goes to sea for trade, I hope you can help me buy a batch of serfs. After getting the formula, Levis was very easy to talk to. Sure, but how much are you willing to pay? 10 silver coins for a serf. That was the price in the past. Now that there are no internal battles in the Grand Duchy, serfs are rarely sold, and it is very difficult to find them. But a while ago, I also heard that the Lord of Smallkerchief Island was killed by pirates and his territory was lost. The Sapphire Grand Duke is very angry about this. He has already spread the word to all the major territories, asking for assistance in encircling these pirates. However, after the pirates destroyed the Smallkerchief Island, they had already disappeared without a trace. Some people think that this is not a group of pirates, but a certain lord in disguise. The Big Kerchief Island is offering a reward of 300 gold coins for information on the pirate. Levis briefly talked about the repercussions caused by the pirates on the small Kerchief Island, and then said, "But apart from this time, the Grand Duchy is calm and peaceful. The slave trade needs a further direction, and it is best to search at the border between the Eagle Kingdom and the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Name a price. If I can accept it, I will agree. 20 silver coins for a serf. It cannot be lower than this price. Otherwise, I will not be able to make a profit." Levis gave his own price. In addition, if the number of serfs is too large, you need to pay the gold coins now, otherwise, I will not be able to account to my father. List thought for a moment, and then nodded in agreement. 100 gold coins, help me bring back 500 serfs. Straightforward. I have a request. These 500 serfs, mainly young people, buy some female serfs. In addition, if there are serfs with a skill, buy them first. You mean blacksmiths, tailors, and cobblers? This is not easy to deal with. Craftsmen are mostly freedmen, and the laws of every country protect freedmen. It is very difficult to sell them as serfs at will. Every aspect of a city's operation was inseparable from freedmen, so the laws of the country would protect them. List clenched his teeth. I will add another 20 gold coins. Among the 500 serfs, at least 100 are craftsmen. All right. Feeling distressed, he gave Levis 120 dazzling naldas. Looking at the shriveled purse, List was quite melancholic. He originally had about 150 gold coins, but with the continuous payment of the commoner's wages, a lot of gold coins had been consumed. Now there were only 16 gold coins left in the purse, which could dry up at any time. Fortunately, the passage to the Thorns Ridge was about to be opened. As long as the caravan was established, the Flower Town seafood could be sold to the Coral City. He believed that the delicious seafood could create a good amount of wealth for him. After the matter of serfs was settled, Levis suddenly mentioned saltpeter. List, can saltpeter ice be produced on a larger scale? I hope so, but unfortunately it is not possible. You can mine more saltpeter ore. Brother, it is not that there is a saltpeter ore for me to mine just because I want to mine it. In fact, there is only a small amount of saltpeter ore in the Flower Town. I can give you a bit of saltpeter powder and the raw ore from when saltpeter is mined. You can look for it yourself. There might be other saltpeter ore on the Coral Island. All right, I will look for it. You might not have noticed, but as long as ice can be produced in the summer, you can definitely earn a lot of gold coins. Levis took a puff from his cigar. When I find a saltpeter ore, I will not treat you unfairly. Did you see that Madame Marie is instigating Father to intervene in the saltpeter ice production? I saw that. List understood. Fortunately, Father does not care about saltpeter ice production. In the summer, he would go to the palace to serve as the Grand Duke's groom. There are countless ice cubes in the palace to enjoy. There are many ice cellars on the Blue Dragon Island. I heard that the largest ice cellar is like a maze. There were workers transporting ice cubes who got lost and froze to death inside. List did not say anything. The greatest aristocrat he had seen was Merlin Longtaro. He did not know what the life of an aristocrat was like, especially an aristocratic family with a dragon. After digestion, the sun had begun to set. The Count and his party were also ready to return. If they did not leave, then they would have to travel at night. Before leaving, the Count rode a horse, followed by List, who also rode a horse. The Flower Town is very good. I hope that you can continue to be enterprising. However, it is not enough to become a qualified lord. The rise of the Tulip family is due to military exploit. The Grand Duke is in the prime of his life, and the flames of pioneering have never been extinguished. Therefore, if you want to leave the Flower Town, then don't give up on your desire for the glory of a knight. Wouldn't it be faster to make me a viscount? Liszt cursed inwardly. The Count obviously did not like him, yet he was playing the role of a strict father. It felt somewhat strange. I understand. Subsequently, the two did not say anything and just rode quietly. After a while, the Count glanced at the black dragon under Liszt. This is a good horse. Take good care of it, it will be the Lord's most important companion. Understood. Immediately after, the two returned and the Count joined the convoy. Carter, along with the servants, stood at the castle's gate and respectfully welcomed the distinguished guests. Liszt said goodbye to them one by one. Grandmother, be careful, get on the carriage. My little boy, if Flower Town makes you uncomfortable, then come back to Tulip Castle. Although the smell there is not good, but it should still be there. Said Madame Penelope. I will go to Tulip Castle often. Li Weiwei hugged him and said, 100 caddies of pig iron, when will you come to the Coral City to get it? I will. Madame Marie pulled the sullen Lytton, who wanted to ride a horse but couldn't. She just smiled at Liszt and said goodbye. Captain Mickey and the other night escorts followed the standard night etiquette. Like Li Weiwei, Levis also hugged him, probably to show brotherly affection in front of the Count. Liszt, the gate of Tulip Castle is always open to you. Thank you. Chapter 76. By the time the convoy left Flower Town, the castle had regained its tranquility. Although there were a lot of plates, wine glasses, and other things that needed to be cleaned up, and the small garden outside the castle had been trampled out of shape by the night. However, Carter could organize the servants to slowly clean up all of this without any pressure. There were 15 servants in the castle, which was enough. Teacher Gort, the festival is about to end. We need to free ourselves from the festive atmosphere. The town's construction progress cannot be stopped. Continue to expand the logging and gravel teams, as well as the fence construction teams, and strive to open the passage as soon as possible. Gort still wanted to continue, as you wish. At this banquet, he was like a fish in water, talking and laughing with the Count. He had not had such a good time in many years. Flower Town is in the limelight. He used such adjectives to describe today's luncheon. There was a dazzling array of seafood, as well as tongue-numbing ice cream. However, Liszt had other ideas. In the evening, he drank a glass of red wine with Carter alone. Mr. Carter, I originally intended to show the impoverished side of Flower Town in exchange for assistance from Tulip Castle. However, I accidentally held a grand banquet with seafood, ice cream, and World of Warcraft meat. There is no reason to complain about being poor. Carter said with a smile, My lord, you have shown your elegant demeanor. Your performance at the banquet was admirable. If I were a knight, I would probably stay in Flower Town and follow you. Another meaning of aristocrats flaunting their wealth was to show off their strength to attract followers. Viscount Trick Blackgrass was attracted by the charm displayed by the Count and became a follower. He helped the Tulip family, participated in the Grand Duchy's pioneering war, and eventually established the huge foundation of the Earl of Coral Island. But no knight stayed, did he? I believe that the seeds have been sown, and maybe one day they will suddenly bloom. That's a very philosophical statement, Mr. Carter. Let's drink to that. Cheers, my lord. After moistening his throat with a mouthful of red wine, Liszt asked, How much food did my father bring today? I brought a lot of food, but most of it was used during the banquet. The leftovers were mainly beer and fine wheat flour. There were also some spices, anise, ginger, pepper, licorice, salt, and sugar. How much wheat flour and beer? There are about 500 caddies of fine wheat flour and 30 barrels of beer. The fine wheat flour was obviously specially made for Liszt to make white bread. He was a little lost in thought. He could feel that the Count still had fatherly feelings for him. Some of the details could be shown. For example, coming to the Flower Town to celebrate the festival was a sign of intimacy. If one really didn't care about Liszt, then there was no need to come to a remote town to celebrate the festival. During the banquet, she deliberately did not care about Saltpeter, but it could be said that she was protecting him, especially when Madame Marie specifically mentioned that the saltpeter mine was worth developing. Now, she had brought a lot more food for him. Could it be that the Count is also an upright person? This is a little troublesome. Liszt was a little restless. If the Count's family did not care about him, then he could easily maintain a gentlemanly friendship and live his life leisurely. What he feared the most was a familial entanglement. Liszt did not know how to deal with it. Should he integrate into this familial affection according to his current identity, or should he maintain his personality and continue to keep his distance? Is this the fetters of familial affection? As long as one is human, one cannot escape this net. After drinking the red wine, Liszt decided to stop thinking about this troublesome matter and let nature take its course. He did not take the initiative and did not refuse. He shook off his thoughts and asked, "Mr. Carter, have you delivered the seafood as a gift to Tulip Castle?" "I have handed it over to Mr. Silva. They are all first-rate dried seafood." "Very good. Courtesy demands reciprocity." Liszt put down the wine-glass. Carter also drank the red wine, put away the 2 glasses, and bowed slightly. "Master, rest early. I wish you a good night. I will take my leave first." "Good night, Mr. Carter. Sweet dreams." The next few days were monotonous and uneventful. In addition to supervising the logging work, Liszt was also paying attention to another matter: the training of the fruit-stealing monkeys. At first, 7 fruit-stealing monkeys, who were not seriously injured, were caught alive and recovered. However, 2 of them were lame and could no longer climb trees. The remaining 5 were given to the town's hunters for training. Ropes, whips, and fruits were used together. Very soon, the unruly fruit-stealing monkeys were tamed. They climbed trees and entered cages. 3 female monkeys and 4 male monkeys. I believe that there will be 10 fruit-stealing monkeys in the second half of the year. Monkeys generally gave birth to 2 babies a year, but each one usually gave birth to 1 baby. Liszt looked at the increasingly obedient fruit-stealing monkeys and was very satisfied. Without the destruction of the fruit-stealing monkeys, this year's fragrant coconuts can ripen. I believe that after a month or 2, we will be able to drink fresh and sweet coconut juice. Fragrant coconuts had no seasonal characteristic. Except for winter, they would bear fruit continuously in other seasons. The Coral City does not seem to have fragrant coconuts for sale. Perhaps it will become a major specialty of the flower town. Unfortunately, it has not bred a fragrant coconut sprite worm. While he was outlining the future of the fragrant coconut tree, the hunters had already begun to train the fruit-stealing monkeys to pick the fruits. The fake fruits were tied to branches for the fruit-stealing monkeys to pick. If they picked the fruits, they would be rewarded with a peanut. If they didn't pick the fruits, they would be whipped. The fruit-stealing monkeys could not run away due to the ropes tied around their neck. If they dared to run, they would be whipped. Remember, animals can also bear grudges and throw tantrums. As long as they work hard, don't whip them at will. If I find you whipping the fruit-stealing monkeys for no reason, then I will whip you. He emphasized with a serious expression. He did not want the fruit-stealing monkeys to rebel in the future and smash a few fruit farmers to death. Sir Lord, please rest assured. We will not forget what you have instructed us to do. The part-time hunters understood that they would henceforth change from farmers to fruit farmers. They were all elated to use the fruit-stealing monkeys for work. If it was not for the sake of training, Liszt would be reluctant to whip them. For fruit farmers, the fruit-stealing monkeys were like knights' horses. After saying goodbye to the fruit-stealing monkeys, Liszt returned to the castle and called over the few merchants among the new serfs. Old Grandette, Sherlock, Harpagon, are you all merchants on the Smallkerchief Island? Liszt repeated his question. Yes, Sir Lord. Is there a merchant on the Smallkerchief Island called Plushkin? Old Grandette replied. "Sir Lord, there are only the three of us who specialize in peddling small goods on the Smallkerchief Island. Moreover, I know the names of everyone in the city, but there is no one called Plushkin." Chapter 77. Liszt did not intend to let the fief's residents establish a caravan of their own. He intended to establish a caravan exclusive to the castle. Without the drive and idea of reform and innovation, he would establish a free trade system. He would just operate his fief in accordance with the practices of the majority of aristocrats. Old Grandette was elected as the caravan's leader. Harpagon and Sherlock assisted him from the side. At present, the only thing you can operate is seafood. Starting from the Coral City, I hope that the Flower Town seafood can be gradually sold in all cities," said Liszt. "As you wish, Sir Lord. So, how do you plan to sell seafood? This is a new thing. Ordinary people, who have never eaten it, would obviously be afraid of it." Old Grandette pondered for a moment before replying. "Sir Lord, we can advertise on the streets that even Sir Count is full of praise for seafood. I believe that there will be countless subjects who will flock to the food praised by Sir Count." This was using celebrities to hype things up. It was not creative, but it was very useful. Sherlock added a little to Old Grandette's method. "You can first contact the kitchens of most aristocrats and send them some seafood for free so that they can taste it. The Coral City has a large number of freedmen, who are also potential buyers of seafood. We can set up stalls on the streets and cook seafood for free so that the passing freedmen can taste it. I believe that before long, everyone in the Coral City will know how delicious seafood is," Harpagon suggested. Liszt felt that both methods were very good. "It seems that you already have a complete business plan. Once the road to the Thorns Ridge is opened, you can start doing business." Old Grandette hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sir Lord, we do not have carriages, so how will we transport seafood to the Coral City? After the road is opened, I will buy a few carriages as soon as possible." Liszt pondered and said, "There were still 16 gold coins in the castle. Generally, a carriage with a shed to pull goods cost 1 gold coin. He could buy 6, but no more as there were not enough horses to pull the carriages." After seeing off Old Grandette and the other two, Liszt sighed slightly. He had thought that the castle's gold coins were enough, but now he found that it was not enough at all. 500 serfs cost him 120 gold coins. If he wanted the town to reach the size of 5,000 people, he would have to prepare at least 600 gold coins. If he wanted the town to reach the size of 10,000 people, he would need nearly 2,000 gold coins. "How about I sell the red blood sword to Levis or Captain Mickey? If it's too expensive, they won't be able to afford it. 1,000 gold coins should be enough, right?" However, when he grasped the red blood sword hanging at his waist, the warm magical power made him unable to make such a decision. It was a gemstone weapon. The gemstones produced by dragons represented power. Moreover, it matched his Dochi attribute. Even if he became a Sky Knight in the future, this red blood sword would still be worthy of his identity. I can only develop it slowly. I hope that this year, the Flower Town will have a bumper harvest by relying on the compost. Coupled with the sprite worms that I brought and the sprite worms that were born on their own, next quarter's tax revenue should be able to exceed 15 gold coins, right? This quarter's tax revenue had already been handed over to the castle. After careful calculation, Isaiah estimated that the various crops and handicrafts harvested in this spring season were worth about 7 gold coins. In previous years, the spring tax revenue was generally about 3 gold coins. In the winter, there was almost no tax revenue, about 4 gold coins in the summer, about 7 gold coins in the autumn, and less than 15 gold coins in the whole year. This year, with the sprite worms, relying on the compost for the fields, and fishing for seafood, Liszt was confident that the summer tax revenue could reach last year's level. In the autumn, the tax revenue would definitely be higher, and it would not be impossible to surpass Li Weiwei's Falcon Town. Master, your milk tea is ready. The butler Carter walked into the study with a cup of milk tea brewed with fresh milk. It was List's habit to drink a cup of milk tea before going to bed every day. Thank you. After receiving the milk tea, List, who was a little thirsty, drank half of the milk tea with just the right temperature in one gulp. He licked the milk tea foam from the corner of his lips and said with some hesitation, "Mr. Carter, is today's milk tea still brewed by Mrs. Morrison?" "Yes, master." "Is there a problem with today's milk tea?" Carter became a little nervous. List shook his head. "There is no problem with the brewing. However, I feel that Mrs. Morrison's craftsmanship is getting better and better, and the milk tea is getting better and better. I will pass on your compliment to Mrs. Mawson. I am sure she will be very pleased." On the first day of July, the afternoon sun was lazily shining. Clouds would cover the sun from time to time, like a naughty child quietly blinding his friend. The weather was not too hot, and there was still a breeze blowing. List, who was inspecting the logging work, stood on the other side of the Thorns Ridge. With a handsome smile on his face, he solemnly announced, "The trees 100 meters away from both sides of the road have all been chopped down. The logging team has completed my task. As the Lord, I would like to express my respect to you." Respect was just lip service. Next, it was up to the commoners to continue working. The opening of the road to the Thorns Ridge means that the flower town will be connected with the outside world. It will no longer be isolated in a corner of the Coral Island. Anyone can go out and take a look. However, in order to further strengthen the road's safety, the fences must be completed. After a pause, he continued, "Therefore, the logging team will not be disbanded for the time being. Instead, the fences will be built and the woods on both sides of the Thorns Ridge will be completely isolated from the fences." The wood needed for the fences was locally sourced. There was a large amount of wood that had been cut and thrown on the ground. The best wood was transported to the castle for storage, the second best wood was taken to build the oyster settlement's dwellings, the second best wood was used for the fences, and the leftovers were taken back by the commoners to cook. The opening of the road was a moment worth celebrating. List gathered Gort, Marcus, Isaiah, and Blair and arranged the following task. The first was, of course, the issue of the caravan. After purchasing the carriages, they would immediately start selling seafood. The second was the issue of purchasing. List was going to take out the last 10 gold coins to purchase a batch of food that was in short supply, including hops and beer. The third was to publicize to the Coral Island's various cities that they could freely enter and exit the flower town. The castle's caravan was responsible for the large transactions that List had instructed them to do. Under normal circumstances, it would not involve too much trade between commoners. The arrival of foreign caravans into the flower town would enliven the small town's atmosphere and bring about the circulation of wealth and daily necessities. Finally, there is one more thing that needs to be noted. The flower town will welcome freedmen to settle down by lowering taxes. Be sure to spread this news to the various cities. List was now eager to increase his population. He really did not care about the little bit of taxes. The development of the fief was his first priority. The few of them were busy carefully writing down List's instructions. Marcus suddenly said, "Sir, I am going to take a day off and bring my family to live in the flower town." After hearing this, Isaiah heaved a long sigh. "I am afraid that my stupid son is not willing to come to the flower town. He is used to messing around in the Coral City." Blair said cheerfully, "Then I will also bring my family over. Life here is a bit monotonous, but the air is fragrant." Gort smiled awkwardly. "List, I also want to bring my family over, but Freja is pregnant. I can't handle it," List said solemnly. "Teacher Gort, although keeping a mistress outside is a common problem of aristocrats who boast of being dissolute, but it is still immoral. I have no intention of advising you to stop immediately. Besides, Freyja is pregnant. Therefore, in the flower town, you can treat Freyja as your wife. After pondering for a moment, he said again, if her child is a boy, then I hope that he can become my retainer knight in the future. Your generosity makes me ashamed, sir. Gort is willing to serve you. Gort stood up, walked up to List, and solemnly saluted. Chapter 78. Mission completed. Reward: a new variety of mushrooms. Mission: as a knight, one not only needs courage and wisdom, but also enough life-saving ability to display the greatest significance of life. Please learn Marcus' complete set of archery. Reward: black pearls from the deep sea. After the logging work on the Thorns Ridge passage was completed, the smoke mission was updated in time. A new variety of mushrooms was apparently growing somewhere in the Shiitake settlement and was about to be discovered. List had enough patience to wait. Black pearls from the deep sea, what are they? He was somewhat confused. However, pearls on the market were not cheap. They were relatively popular accessories for aristocrat. Black pearls should be more valuable and could be sold for a lot of money. Recently, he had been so poor that he could hardly afford to pay his wages. He was thinking about money like crazy. Learning archery from Marcus was a plan that was put on the agenda a long time ago. Starting tomorrow, I will officially learn archery. Tomorrow doesn't seem to be possible. Marcus has to go to the Coral City to pick up his family. Let's start the day after tomorrow. First, have the caravan go to Tulip Castle and help me buy a bow and arrows. On the Coral Island, only a few aristocratic families were allowed to sell weapons. List, on the other hand, didn't need to go to Tulip Castle to buy one. After all, he was a direct descendant of the Tulip family. Early the next morning, under the leadership of Old Grandet, the newly formed Flower Town's caravan, consisting of 3 merchants, 6 coachmen, and 7 assistants, set off for the Coral City with the castle's 6 old horses. On the backs of each batch of horses, there were a few packets of seafood, as well as a few pots and firewood. This was for cooking seafood on the spot. Riding his yellow-gray horse, Marcus followed the caravan and escorted it in passing. The Knight Squad's training course was temporarily handed over to retainer Knight Karl Hammerstein. He was the only retainer knight who already had a sense of chi and was about to cultivate chi. As for the other 3 retainer knight, there was no sign of chi so far. As for the Knight Squad, the youngsters had eaten their fill during this time and trained hard. Their muscles had already begun to bulge. Philip Wool and Xavier Cowdung, who had the best physiques and had reached the standards of Knight Academy, had already begun to sense chi and could cultivate chi at any time. Blair also went with the caravan to pick up his family and settle down in the Flower Town. Gort and Isaiah, whose families were unwilling or inconvenient to come, continued to maintain the town's administrative operations. There was still a lot of work to be done. The roads were still being repaired, the oyster settlement's houses were still being built, the wasteland was still being reclaimed, and a new and important work had also begun to be planned. Teacher Gort, Isaiah, the town needs to be reorganized. Probably tomorrow, Marcus and Blair's families will arrive. Arrange for their accommodation as soon as possible. They're all big families, so they can't continue to live in the administrative office. Don't worry, sir. I've already considered this last night. I've already rented 2 houses next to the administrative office for Marcus and Blair's families to stay temporarily. Gort's tone became more and more respectful. He had already followed List for the sake of his upcoming illegitimate child. Following List meant that he had become List's subject. It was no longer just an equal relationship of nobility and the friendship between teacher and student. I'm glad that you've thought of things ahead of me. List was satisfied with Gort's current attitude. Then let's continue with the town's plan. In about 3 months, a group of 500 serfs and freedmen will settle down in the Flower Town. The settlements will have to build more houses and the town will have to be expanded. Gort already knew that Liszt wanted to sell slaves. He asked directly, "How will this group of commoners be distributed? How many serfs will there be?" "If nothing unexpected happens, there will be 400 serfs to supplement the settlement's farming. There will be 100 freedmen, most of whom are craftsmen. As appropriate, some workshops will be planned in the town." A simple map of the town was spread out. Liszt drew a horizontal line with his finger on the original only street and said, "We will build another road so that the town is laid out in the shape of a cross. This is not a small project. 3 months may not be enough. Let's build it first." Liszt was not an expert. He could not accurately budget and long-term planning. He often did what he thought of: the streets must be spacious. The 4 areas of the cross will be divided into the east, south, west, and north. The west will be planned as a commercial area. Later, the exchange and food market will be built. The development of the social system in this world was very backward. The cities were more like densely packed dilapidated houses with no concept of a planned area. But Liszt was not willing to do this. The south will be planned as a workshop area. Later, mills, slaughterhouses, and blacksmiths will be moved to this area. The north will be a serf residential area and the east will be a free residential area. In addition, further west of the commercial area, near the castle, will be planned as an aristocratic residential area. It was very immoral to divide people into different classes, but this was the social system. It was impossible for aristocrats to live with commoners, and freedmen and serfs could not be in the same pot. After carefully thinking about Liszt's words, Gort couldn't help but exclaim, "Sir, your idea is really unique. It has opened my mind. It turns out that a city can be built in this way. In this way, no matter how far away a merchant is, they will still be able to find a place to do business." Isaiah was a little slow, but after listening to Gort's explanation, he also understood the benefits of urban planning. "It is also an eye-opener for me. The flower town will become a pearl of the coral island." Liszt smiled slightly. "Most importantly, more toilets must be built. I don't want to see anyone urinating and defecating in the town, even if it is a 3-year-old child." Immediately after, he added, "Hang signs in every shop, hang conspicuous signs in every toilet, and set up signs at the entrances to the roads. No matter who comes to the flower town in the future, they must abide by the rule of not urinating and defecating anywhere." He had a deep feeling about this, because just a few days ago, during the Out to the Sea festival, the Count's accompanying knight had defecated more than a dozen times in the vicinity of his castle at noon. For many knights, this was a normal thing. If they wanted to defecate, they would do it. But Liszt didn't allow it. He didn't want to stroll in the horse field and accidentally step on a pile of feces. As natives, Gort and Isaiah didn't care about this. They had done things like urinating and defecating everywhere before. But Liszt had already ordered them to do so. They nodded in agreement. "Sir, please rest assured. We will give top priority to the town's hygiene." Liszt suddenly remembered something. "By the way, Isaiah, my night squad's youngsters are illiterate. I hope to hire you as the night squad's teacher to teach them common words. At the very least, they must be able to read." There was no night college in the flower town, so he could only hire teachers. Chapter 79. The caravan did not return at night. Instead, it waited until noon the next day before returning to the flower town. 2 of the 6 carriages were full of goods, while the other 4 carried Marcus and Blair's family members. The 6 horses were exhausted, and the single carriage was a bit overloaded. "Sir!" Marcus dismounted and saluted. Soon, a large group of people alighted from the carriages behind him. "Teacher Marcus, if I remember correctly, you don't have so many family members, do you?" Liszt carefully counted. Marcus's family alone had 22 people. My 2 elder sisters and their family are also willing to follow me to the flower town to settle down. Marcus replied, they live in poverty in the Coral City, mainly because they have too many children. Even though I often provide them with financial assistance, it is still difficult for them to have enough to eat and wear. Liszt nodded. He always welcomed people. Soon after, Blair's family also saluted him. Blair's family wasn't that large, just his wife and 4 children. His eldest son had just been married and had yet to have children. Liszt had Gort settle down the 2 families. Only then did Liszt begin to inquire about the caravan's business. Old Grandette said nervously, "Sir, not many portions of seafood were sold. Half of it was given to the Coral City citizens as free food. In fact, many of the citizens who had tasted seafood said that it was delicious. However, one person who had eaten seafood had red spots all over his body, vomiting and having diarrhea, which led to the citizens' fear of seafood." Harpagon added, "If the patrol hadn't heard that the caravan belonged to you, Sir Lord, then I'm afraid that all of our goods would have been confiscated." Allergic to seafood? Liszt mused. Some people were indeed allergic to seafood. However, none of the Flower Town's residents were allergic to seafood. This made him believe that people would not be allergic to the other world's seafood. He didn't expect that there would be people allergic to seafood. It is indeed unexpected. However, you don't have to feel pressured. Very few people will have physical problems due to eating seafood. However, this is only a small minority. Once a problem arises, immediately stop and recover. Next time you sell seafood, remember to make it clear. Yes, Sir Lord. Have you purchased all the things I need? Thick bast paper, dried milk powder, hops beer, red wine. Everything has been purchased, but the pig pancreas you needed, we were unable to buy it. The few slaughterhouses in Coral City do not keep pig pancreas. I've already contacted them and asked them to keep the pig pancreas as much as possible. We'll buy it next time. Pig pancreas is used to make pancreas, which is also used to make soap. The castle now used soap powder, a kind of powder ground from the fruit of the honey locust tree. There were soap makers among the new serfs, who could add flower petals to the soap powder and make soap. However, the production of soap was very complicated. The soap maker, Burnell, did not have the equipment and had yet to make the soap. Therefore, Liszt hoped to make his own pancreas. After old Grandette reported the situation, he prepared to hand over the money to Liszt. Of course, Liszt would not accept it with his hands. It would be beneath his status. Liszt picked up the cup on the table and said lightly, "Mr. Carter, you and old Grandette will be responsible for the castle's purchases in the future." "As you wish, master." Carter accepted the task without hesitation. Marcus's family and Blair's family had dinner in the castle. Liszt no longer asked about their arrangements and directly left it to Gort. As a lord, his most important job was to enjoy himself. "Master, there is a small matter in the Shiitake settlement. I don't know if you are interested in hearing it." While Mrs. Morrison was cleaning the study with Maggie, she said to Liszt, who was reading a night novel to pass the time. "Shiitake settlement?" Liszt instantly thought of his mission reward, a new variety of mushrooms. What happened in the Shiitake settlement? Most of the shiitake used in the castle is picked from Crooked Neck Bob's house. His family's shiitake is the most tender. But these days Bob is often frowning. On the shelf where he grows shiitake, a kind of bright red shiitake grows. When he shovels a batch, another batch will grow. Before he finished, Liszt immediately stood up from his chair and walked out of the study without looking back. He shouted upstairs, "Thomas, prepare the horse." Thomas, who was about to sleep, hurriedly ran out of the room and hurriedly prepared the horse. Carter also quickly walked over. "Master, do you have something important to do tonight?" "It's very important. I have to go to the Shiitake settlement. Send someone to inform Gort." He suddenly remembered something. He turned to the housekeeper in the study and said, "Mrs. Morrison, come with me. Lead the way to Crooked Neck Bob's house." A moment later, Thomas prepared the horse. He lit a torch and walked under the moonlight towards the Shiitake settlement. The manservant Jesse rode a horse to the town and called Gort and List's 4 retainer knight to meet up with List in the Shiitake settlement. The Shiitake settlement was noisy for a while. Crooked Neck Bob was extremely nervous. Mrs. Morrison knocked on the door and told him that the Sir Lord wanted to go to his Shiitake shed. He thought that there was a problem with his Shiitake, and that the Sir Lord was going to hold him accountable. As a serf, he was responsible for farming for the Lord. If he did not do well, he would be whipped. "Bob, don't be nervous. Master is merciful. You didn't make a deliberate mistake. He won't punish you easily." "Mrs. Morrison, is this true?" "You must help me plead with the Sir Lord, please, please." Bob was still nervous. At this time, List was already in his Shiitake shed. Thomas followed closely with a torch. "Master, what are you looking for?" "I've found what I'm looking for." List's pupils rotated like whirlpools, and a little bit of starlight seemed to twinkle in the deep and boundless universe. In his field of vision, there were several pieces of rotten Shiitake wood, which had traces of light red magic power, outlining the shapes of mushrooms. He dispersed his magic eyes. By the light of the fire, he saw what was emitting magic power. It was a bright red mushroom. It looked a bit like a red mushroom, dotted in the middle of a large field of Shiitake. It was obvious that the surrounding Shiitake had withered, except for this red mushroom, which looked very fresh and bright. "It really is a magic ingredient mushroom." List wanted to laugh out loud because the magic power of this mushroom is red. This is a color that only fire-attributed magic power can have. "I am a fire-attributed warrior chi. This red mushroom is a great tonic for me." The Sky Knight was basically a medicine pot. Without a lot of magic ingredients, it was difficult to rely on his own body to attack a higher realm of chi. "Thomas, have Mrs. Morrison bring Bob over." When Bob stood nervously in front of him, he smiled and said, "Are you Bob? Don't be nervous." Bob was so scared that he knelt down and kept kowtowing. "Sir Lord, I made a mistake. I spoiled the Shiitake ingredients. Sir Lord, please forgive me." Chapter 80. Crooked Neck Bob was so excited that he couldn't sleep all night. Not only did Sir Lord not blame him, but he was even rewarded with 10 silver coins. This was simply like a pie falling from the sky. Moreover, Sir Lord also told him to find a way to expand the planting area of the red mushrooms. Sir Lord had given them a name, flame mushrooms. It would be best if all the Shiitake were replaced with flame mushrooms. The more they were planted, the more rewards they would receive in the future. Quiet. The tomato settlement's Johann received a gold coin as a reward from Sir Lord. His wife couldn't bear to see Bob getting too excited and couldn't help but pour cold water on him. Bob didn't care in the slightest. "What do you know? It is only a reward of 10 silver coins because Sir Lord wants me to figure out the planting ingredients for the flame mushrooms. I, Bob, am the best at planting Shiitake in the Shiitake settlement. As long as I figure out the ingredients, Sir Lord said that there will be more rewards." He had a longing look on his face. "It will definitely be more than Johann's 1 gold coin. Perhaps it will be 2 gold coins? Heavens, what a wonderful moment! I have 2 gold coins. However, you have to figure out the ingredients first. If you don't, then Sir Lord might take back the 10 silver coins and whip you." "Of course I will figure it out, I will figure it out." Of course, Bob wouldn't be the only one to figure out the planting ingredients for the flame mushrooms. List had already consulted with Gort, who had hurried over, to gather all the Shiitake planting experts in the Shiitake settlement to figure it out together. Whoever could figure out the recipe of the ingredients would be rewarded. List didn't have many gold coins left, but he wasn't stingy. He wanted to use the magic of money to arouse the subject's enthusiasm for exploring new things, rather than continuing to lifelessly repeat the farming methods of the older generation. Teacher Gort, the planting ingredients for the flame mushrooms will be classified as the flower town's top secret and must not be divulged to anyone. Henceforth, all places where the flame mushrooms are planted will be classified as restricted areas. Only with the castle's authorization can one enter and exit these areas. Liszt said solemnly. Ordinary plant magic ingredients required sprite worms to coordinate with them, which were very difficult to replicate. For example, the magic tulip could only be grown by the tulip family. Even if an outsider stole the seed, without the tulip elves to cultivate it, it would degenerate into a normal tulip in less than 1 or 2 generations. Mushroom potions, on the other hand, were different. They could be multiplied continuously. Once the spores and ingredients were stolen by outsiders, they could be cultivated on a large scale with a little research. Gort understood the importance of this matter. Sir, please rest assured. I will discuss with Isaiah a set of confidential plans to ensure that there is no possibility of the slightest possibility of the cultivation method of the flame mushrooms being leaked. You have to be more careful. This is a magic ingredient mushroom. You can't pay too much attention to it. Understood. Gort nodded and then sighed with emotion. In a short period of time, the flower town has changed greatly. 2 sprite worms and 2 magic ingredients have been born. This land is definitely blessed by the night's glory. My lord, you must be the successor of the night's glory. The glory of the night was a slogan that the nobles loved to say. This world had a very medieval style, yet it had not developed a religion that ruled over almost everything. This was probably because humans could cultivate themselves and reach the realm of invincible experts, free from disease and calamity. Therefore, they were dismissive of God and even had the feeling that, I am God. The nobles only believed in the glory of the night. The cultivation of qi, continuously becoming a more powerful night, could bring them everything. Of course, there were also exceptions. Wizards definitely did not believe in the glory of the night. Reportedly, they believed in knowledge. Liszt calmly looked at the clear moonlight. If there really was a night's glory, then he believed that he was indeed blessed by the night's glory, giving him a wonderful life experience. I hope to ride a dragon one day. Marcus arrived at the castle early. Starting today, he would teach Liszt archery. My archery is called multiple arrows, an advanced extension of fundamental archery. It focuses on the control of multiple arrows, not the power of the arrows. My lord does not have the foundation of archery, so you cannot learn multiple arrows, for the time being. You must first start with fundamental archery. Saying so, he handed over a bundle of arrows. This is? Liszt had bought a bow from Tulip Castle, a hard bow suitable for an earth knight, and also 100 birch arrows. The arrows are made from the feathers of the winged peregrine falcon and oak from the thorn's ridge. The falcon feather arrows are all handmade by me, a total of 24 arrows. Among them, there are 6 falcon tail arrows made from the tail feathers of the winged peregrine falcon. In order to distinguish them, I drew a red circle on the arrow shaft. The falcon tail arrows are more balanced than the falcon feather arrows. Marcus somewhat regretfully said. Unfortunately, most of the feathers of the winged peregrine falcon were destroyed by the monkeys. Otherwise, a large number of falcon feather arrows could be made, which are much better than the ordinary bird feather arrows on the market. The fine magic power on the feathers can make the arrows fly faster and more steadily. The winged peregrine falcon, after fighting with the monkeys, had all of its feathers scratched off. Then, Liszt used a big move, burning a lot of its feathers. Being able to repair and make 24 falcon feather arrows was already not easy. However, Liszt didn't take the falcon feather arrows. I still haven't learned archery, so I can't use the falcon feather arrows for the time being. Teacher Marcus keep them. When we clean up World of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge, we will need to rely on Teacher Marcus's accurate archery. Marcus didn't decline. Yes, my lord. Next was teaching time. As a sharpshooter, Marcus had a very deep understanding of archery, and his teaching method was also very clear. List quickly immersed himself in learning archery. As an Earth Knight, his physical constitution was very tough. He could continuously shoot arrows, which was much more convenient than ordinary people learning archery. The smoke mission is for me to learn Marcus's complete set of archery. In other words, just learning the basic archery isn't enough, I also have to learn the multiple arrows. I have to speed up my learning, otherwise this mission will take too long. For this reason, List even suspended his chi cultivation. He wholeheartedly immersed himself in archery. As a result, on the horse field outside the castle, there was a constantly galloping shadow. That was List constantly shooting arrows on horseback, shooting at various erected targets. He learned very quickly. After a day, he could already stand still and shoot at the bullseye. 9 out of 10 arrows could hit the 7 or 8 ring position. The Earth Knight's mastery of the body could quickly strengthen his muscle memory, allowing him to figure out how to shoot more accurately. After 2 days, he could already hit the target 5 out of 10 arrows on horseback. On the 4th day, List continued to go to the horse field, preparing to practice archery on horseback. However, a shameful act occurred on the horse field. Black Dragon rode on Fiery Dragon for about 4 minutes before it dismounted and pretended to be leisurely, lowering its head to graze. Chapter 81. Black Dragon was a dragon stallion. In order to develop the Black Dragon herd, the quality of the mares could not be too poor. Fiery Dragon was the most suitable breeding partner. However, there was only one Fiery Dragon. Therefore, horses that could go to the battlefield could be used as breeding partners. Marcus Mount, the yellow-gray horse, was a horse breed that could go to the battlefield, but it was a stallion. Gort, Isaiah, and Blair's horses could go to the battlefield. Furthermore, they were mares. Mares generally did not go to the battlefield as they were more docile. They were suitable for aristocrats or aristocratic descendants who did not love the battlefield. I think we will soon have no horses to ride on. Gort looked at his mount, which was being whipped to its heart's content by Black Dragon. It was unknown what expression he had on his face. Most importantly, the mare clearly hadn't entered the estrus period. Black Dragon had forced himself on her. This was List's bad taste. His mount, Fiery Dragon, had already been defiled by Black Dragon. Naturally, other people's mounts could not be spared. There was a smile on Marcus's face. It was unknown whether he was gloating over Gort's misfortune, or looking forward to the future of the Flower Town's horses. He simply said, "Even pregnant mares can be ridden for about 11 months. You can ride them before 7 months, but after 7 months you have to reduce the number of times you can ride them. Additionally, they should not gallop for long distances, as it will increase the risk of miscarriage." Marcus knew horses very well. However, he was not the one who knew horses the best in the Flower Town. The one who knew horses the best was the serf from the Smallkerchief Island, One-Eyed Barton. He had once transported horses for the Smallkerchief family, traveled north and south, drank water from behind a toilet, and had seen many kinds of horses. "Sir Lord, I have never seen a horse more spirited than Black Dragon. It must have an extraordinary bloodline." One-Eyed Barton was about 45 years old, had a thick beard, and was blind in one eye. In order to examine his expertise, List had him identify Black Dragon. "Then what lineage do you think it has?" "I've seen horses with low-level World of Warcraft bloodline. The Fire Dragon that Sir Lord often rides is of low-level World of Warcraft bloodline. I've seen a hybrid between a dark demonic horse and an ordinary horse in World of Warcraft. It was a new breed bred in a horse farm in the Blast Castle Kingdom. While speaking, Barton shook his head. But that breed of horse is not as spirited as Black Dragon. It is taller than Black Dragon, but its eyes and spirit are lacking. That's why I'm guessing that its mixed bloodline is even higher than Intermediate World of Warcraft, or Advanced World of Warcraft, I'm not sure. He already had a very high estimation of Black Dragon's bloodline, but there was still a gap. This was a dragon horse. List didn't plan on saying it out loud. He had to keep a low profile, so he asked One-Eyed Barton a few more questions about horses. One-Eyed Barton's answers were clear and logical. So he directly said, "Barton, tell me your surname." One-Eyed Barton's complexion darkened. "Sir Lord, Barton used to be an orphan without a surname. I was raised by a horse dealer. Later, Lord Smallkerchief bought Barton from the Blast Castle Kingdom, and I've been selling horses for Lord Smallkerchief." "Is that so?" List nodded. "Have you ever been married?" "No." Not married meant that it didn't matter if he had a surname or not. If he married and had descendants, he would have to pass it on. At that time, Barton would probably change his name to One-Eyed Barton. "In that case, you don't have to plow the fields. I'm hiring you as the castle's groom. You'll be responsible for managing the horse farm and taking care of the castle's horses." Barton happily kowtowed. Barton will definitely take good care of Sir's horse farm. Groom not only meant raising horses, but also a servant of the castle. As long as he didn't make any mistakes, he wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. In the aristocratic system, servants were a very important link. They shouldered all the castle's work and maintained the castle's internal operations. Basically, servants could be divided into 5 categories. Upstairs servants, retainer knight, downstairs servants, kitchen servants, and outdoor servants. Upstairs servants included tutors, family doctors, and elderly noblemen's attendants. They generally didn't live in the castle, but they could eat with the noblemen upstairs. Retainer knight included squires who did odd jobs on the battlefield and squires who fought together with the noblemen. They had their own families. Downstairs servants included housekeepers, manservants, and maids. They were the castle's main staff and lived downstairs. Kitchen servants included servants who worked in the kitchen. In addition, there were outdoor servants. This was a general term because it included groom, coachman, forest protector, hunter protector, gatekeeper, gardener, and so on. They generally lived in independent houses outside the castle. Usually, they didn't work in the castle. Instead, they raised horses, raised flowers, hunted, and so on. If it was a great noble, the servants would be further subdivided. In the hall, there were concierge, caterer, bartender, laundry servant, housekeeper, personal room servant, secretary, clothing servant, horse trainer, dog trainer, funny clown, zither player, drummer, flute player, and so on. In short, as long as the nobleman needed it, they could hire a servant for anything. For commoners, becoming a servant was something worth mentioning. Compared to serfs, servants obviously enjoyed a better life, and did lighter work. Moreover, between noblemen-servant relationships were established. It was common for lesser noblemen to become servants of greater noblemen. For example, Gort, as a down-and-out lord knight, was List's tutor. Even the Earl of Coral Island, the Sky Knight who held the power of life and death on the island, was proud to be a groom for the Sapphire Grand Duke. The longer List lived in the small town's castle, the more he felt that there was no equality between people. Take care of Black Dragon first, Barton. It has been working very hard recently, and I don't want to see it tired out on a certain mare one day. List looked at Black Dragon, who worked hard day and night, and said solemnly. Barton carefully observed Black Dragon's teeth through the gap between its mouth. It is still a young horse, so it is normal to be a little restless. Now that the weather is getting hotter and hotter, its estrus will gradually weaken over time. However, the number of times it copulates with each mare has to be divided. First of all, ensure that fiery dragon gets pregnant. Understood, Master. Barton quickly played the role of a groom and called List Master. In order to get fiery dragon pregnant as soon as possible, List no longer planned to ride Black Dragon or Fiery Dragon. He switched to an ordinary horse and continued to practice archery. In mid-July, when he could move quickly while riding an ordinary horse, he hit all the targets one by one and didn't deviate too far from the bullseye. Marcus announced that he had officially graduated from the basic archery and could start practicing the multiple arrows. At the very most, he had only learned it for a week. Therefore, he was very confident in learning the multiple arrows and expected to completely master it by the time August arrived. Master, your ice cream. Thomas brought over a cup of fragrant ice cream. List, who was still diligently practicing archery in the hot weather, picked up the ice cream and ate it in big mouthfuls. A cool feeling spread from head to toe, and the comfortable taste was wonderful. If he didn't have the help of ice cream, cold beer, and cold juice, he would never practice archery in the middle of summer. Fortunately, the mining of the super-small saltpeter mine had already been completed, and they had obtained a total of 300 kilograms of saltpeter, which was enough to produce enough ice for the castle to use every day. At night, List would put a few pieces of ice in his study and bedroom to cool down. Chapter 82. Multiple Arrows. Didn't have any combat energy training content, so it wasn't a combat energy secret manual, but it was a combat energy technique. A knight of any attribute could practice it. It was divided into 3 levels: double arrows, triple arrows, and multiple arrows, as well as an ultimate move, multiple phantom arrows. Marcus, riding the yellow-gray horse, carefully demonstrated the multiple arrows that he had practiced, and then explained each arrow in conjunction with it. There are 5 ways to use double arrows. The most common one I use is double arrows at the same time, which is to simply shoot 2 arrows and hit one target. The second is double arrows cross, which is to shoot 2 arrows side by side and use magic to guide the impact, thus changing the direction in the air. The remaining double arrows spiral, double arrows chain, and double arrows rapid arrows aren't very practical. It was indeed difficult to control the horse and the arrows while riding on a horse. So what Marcus meant was that as long as one was proficient in double arrows at the same time and double arrows cross, they could already be called a godly archer and would be invincible on the battlefield. As for the other archery techniques, they could only be effective while standing on the ground and carefully practicing them. He continued, triple arrow is basically an advanced version of double arrow. 3 arrows in unison, 3 arrows in spiral, 3 arrows in chain, 3 arrows in rapid release, and 3 arrows in random release. The theory is the same, but the control requirements are higher. The same goes for multiple arrows. Multiple arrows at the same time, spiral shadow arrows, multiple arrows chain, multiple arrows random arrows, and multiple arrows cross require more control. After stopping the horse, Marcus could use triple arrows and multiple arrows one by one. After emptying the quiver, he shook his head, not satisfied with his archery skills. I can master triple arrows while standing still, but not multiple arrows. It's too difficult. There's also the ultimate move, multiple phantom arrows. I need at least a quarter of an hour to prepare this move before I dare to use it. A person's hand. Holding 1 arrow was very stable, holding 2 arrows was not bad, and holding 3 arrows was also fine, just enough space for 3 fingers to hold 1 arrow each. But holding more arrows was not possible. One had to hold 2 arrows between fingers, which was very difficult, not to mention that one had to allocate magic to guide each arrow. The Earth Knight's control of combat energy could not be so subtle. The squire plucked the arrows off the target one by one and handed them back to Marcus. Marcus let out a long sigh, trying to ease his tense emotions. Sir, it's already hard for me to control more than 3 multi-arrows. Now, it's even harder to control the ultimate profoundness. That's why I broke it down into 2 shots, 3 arrows each, which can barely achieve the effect recorded in multiple arrows. He pulled out 3 arrows from the quiver. The first 3 arrows use a gentle force, allowing the arrows to be thrown out at a low speed. The last 3 arrows use a violent force, allowing the arrows to be thrown out at a high speed and collide with the first 3 arrows. Thus, the speed of the 6 arrows reaches the same, and their trajectories are disrupted, like phantoms. After that, he opened his mouth and bit down on the 3 arrows, then pulled out another 3 arrows and fired. The moment he let go, the 3 arrows flew upwards. He quickly put the 3 arrows in his mouth into his hand, and once again drew the bow. This time, the bowstring was almost pulled into a full moon, and the moment the arrow was released, there was a violent whistling sound. Shio! 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 In midair, the 3 fast arrows flew in a flat trajectory, colliding with the arrows in front of them. In an instant, the 6 arrows spun in the air. Looking at it with the naked eye, it was as if dozens of arrows had suddenly appeared, randomly shooting at the 3 targets. Before Liszt could even blink, the phantoms dispersed, leaving only 6 arrows, which hit the target in the middle. 5 of the arrows stuck straight into the target, but 1 brushed past the target and flew out. I still can't completely grasp the trajectories of the 6 arrows, Marcus said with some disappointment. But Liszt applauded. Teacher Marcus, your archery skills are already amazing. Let's quickly start practicing. I can't wait to use multi-phantom arrows. In reality, he felt a little bitter in his heart. Marcus's archery skills were simply unfathomable. He originally thought that it was just a routine of 2 or 3 arrows, and he just needed to learn it casually. But now he discovered that without being proficient in double arrow and triple arrow, he might not be able to learn multi-arrow, let alone the ultimate meaning of multi-phantom arrows. This is probably the most difficult smoke mission I have ever encountered. It was already halfway through July. He really wasn't sure if he could learn multi-arrow by the time August arrived. Although it was very difficult, he still had to do what he had to do. He decided to put down the burden of his thoughts and concentrate on learning archery. One day, he would learn this complicated multi-arrow. Just as the Count had said at the Going Out to the Sea festival, "Don't be impatient, time is on your side." He was only 16 years old. He still had a long life ahead of him. The flower town was thriving with each passing day. There were no crises that could not be dealt with, so he could live a relaxed and happy life. The dream of riding a dragon could not be fulfilled in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, August arrived. During this half a month, Liszt had been frantically learning archery. He had successfully mastered triple arrow and had begun to move towards multi-arrow. The maras on the stud farm were basically all pregnant. Black Dragon had lost a lot of weight. Even with its dragon bloodline, it could not withstand the constant labor. Master, the stud farm's alfalfa has reached its limit. At present, the fief has a total of 15 horses, 5 stallions and 10 maras, all grazing on the stud farm. Apart from the 3 old maras that have lost their fertility, the other 7, including Fire Dragon, are already pregnant. One-Eyed Barton said, "There are too many pregnant horses, and Black Dragon is about to get hurt. Therefore, they need a lot of nutrition. Relying on the stud farm's forage alone is definitely not enough. As long as the horses are raised well, just tell me what you need." Liszt was very concerned about the horses. For the sake of their health and nutrition, they need better concentrated fodder, preferably oats, barley, and wheat bran. Peanuts and peas are also very good. This food was not worse than what the commoners ate, and even more. At least in terms of quantity, a horse's daily rations were equivalent to that of 3 adults. Liszt did not refuse, directly agreeing to One-Eyed Barton. all right. He also had the confidence to agree, because after the Thorns Ridges road was opened, the Flower Town's caravan could go out to do business unimpeded. Present, they mainly sold seafood. The market had just opened, and Tulip Castle was the main buyer. They would go once every 3 days, and each time, they would purchase about half a gold coin worth of seafood. The Coral City citizens also began to enjoy the delicious seafood. They would also go once every 3 days, and each time they would sell it for half a gold coin. In addition, the numerous lesser aristocrats living in the Coral City, as well as the aristocrats and citizens of the North Valley City, which was closest to the Flower Town, added up to 1 gold coin every 3 days. In other words, the Flower Town's caravan could earn 2 gold coins every 3 days. On average, they earned 67 silver coins a day. The cost of seafood and the cost of traveling were practically negligible. This was a net income. Of course, Liszt had yet to see the gold and silver coins. Every time the caravan earned a bit, he would order them to purchase the items needed by the castle: salt, sugar, cloth, seasoning, soap, beer, and so on. There was also the pig pancreas, which he had specifically ordered. He even had the caravan purchase 10 piglets, which he gave to the Barley Settlement's serfs to raise in the future. Chicken and duck seedlings were temporarily out of season, so they could not be bought. Foals, calves, and lambs were too expensive, so they could not be bought. For the time being, they had to rely on the town's own livestock production. This time, the caravan brought back. Carter, who had finished the transaction with old Grandette, returned to the castle and reported to Liszt. Chapter 83. Why was milk tea getting better and better every day? Liszt discovered this problem more than half a month ago. At first, he thought that Mawson Patty's craftsmanship was improving, but it was impossible to feel the improvement of her craftsmanship every day. In fact, Master, Carter said, recently, the desserts made with cream have also improved their taste. Mrs. Morrison and Mrs. Abbey think that this may be related to the dairy cows on the farm. Big Black and Big Yellow are pregnant with calves. The milk production is constantly improving, and the quality has also improved. Pregnant with calves can also improve the quality of milk? It's probably because the dairy farm has cultivated alfalfa. Compared with the previous two-leaf clover, alfalfa is more nutritious. I went to the dairy farm to have a look. The 8 cows are in very good condition, especially the 3 calves. They are growing very fast and are about to enter the milk-producing period. Very good. When the calves grow up, there will be no shortage of milk to drink in the castle. Liszt drank the cup of milk tea in 1 gulp. This time, the calves in the cow's belly must be fed. Dairy cows were pregnant for about 9 months. In order to maintain milk production after giving birth to calves, they had to start getting pregnant. Therefore, a dairy cow could basically give birth to 1 calf a year. However, due to nutrition, hygiene, disease, and other restrictions, the calf could not grow into a dairy cow. It was very likely that it would die midway. In this era, even human children had a great risk of dying prematurely. Even if the aristocrats had strong bodies and doctors to provide treatment, there was no guarantee that the baby would survive. After more than 10 years of breeding on the dairy farm, they had only raised 10 cows. Now that 2 old cows had been eaten by the invisible dragon, there were only 8 left. The pasture was enough to support a few more cows. Milk was an essential food for aristocrat. It was as important as bread and beer. Liszt could not live without milk. He liked drinking milk tea very much. A cup of fresh milk in the morning, a cup of brewed milk for lunch and dinner, and a cup of milk tea before going to bed. The nutrition provided by 4 cups of milk tea made up for his daily consumption of qi cultivation. A night's qi originated from the body. Without nutrition, how could there be qi? Liszt wiped the milk tea foam from the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief. Liszt suddenly wanted to bring out the pearl milk tea. However, there were no purple potatoes or pumpkins on the coral island, so it was impossible to produce pearls. Therefore, he could only continue to drink milk tea without any additive. When he first came to the castle, the milk tea brewed by Mrs. Morrison was not only a mixture of milk and black tea, but also minced meat, eggs, salt, sugar, salad, and so on, which were later forcibly removed by Liszt. Restoring the original taste of the milk tea. After finishing the cup of milk tea, he said cheerfully, "When the income of the castle increases, I plan to raise a batch of cows and strive to let the servants and squires of the castle drink a cup of fresh milk every day." Carter replied with a smile, "You are always so generous. Only with a little kindness would a servant forever remain loyal." The most important reason was that he wanted to improve the nutrition treatment of the night squad. The next morning, he went to the horse field to practice the multiple arrows, no longer needing Marcus' guidance. Marcus was not far away. He was still training the night squad. The three retainer knight, Rome Winebarrow, Grey Sickle, and Odin Insole were also training with the night squad. Only Karl Hammerstein was no longer training with the squad and returned to Liszt. He had successfully cultivated chi and became a trainee knight. His chi was of the water attribute and was very weak. Marcus judged that there was no potential to be unearthed. However, Karl was already very satisfied. These past few days, he was so happy that he could not close his mouth. Having chi meant that he was strong, which meant that he was being put in an important position. "Karl, your chi talent has been developed too late, so it will stop here. Once the night squad is trained, it will be very difficult for you to get the opportunity to be my retainer knight. Therefore, I plan to have you work in the town." Liszt was practicing archery while communicating with Karl. Karl was not young anymore. He had already married and had children in Coral City. He said with a solemn expression, "Sir, Karl is willing to follow you. I know your loyalty, but the position of retainer is not suitable for you. With your strength, competing with the youngsters of the night squad will be very disadvantageous. Sir, Karl also understood that he could not compare to the youngsters of the night squad. This was because there were two youngsters, Philip Wool and Xavier Oxtung, who had cultivated chi earlier than him. One had wind attribute chi, while the other had lightning attribute chi. The remaining 10 youngsters had also cultivated chi and could obtain chi at any time. They had more than enough time to advance to become an Earth Knight. He was somewhat flustered. He was not a very smart person. Therefore, for a moment, he became confused about his future. Liszt sighed slightly in his heart. He was not an unreasonable and ruthless person. However, the retainer knight was even more so. They needed to protect him, so he could not be the slightest bit careless. Go to the patrol squad. The patrol squad is made up of ordinary people. The security work needs a trainee knight to coordinate. Yes, sir. Karl was a little disappointed. The patrol squad could not compare to the prestige of a lord's retainer knight. Liszt could see that Karl was disappointed. He just said lightly, "I will grant you the status of a freedman and appoint you as the Flower Town's defense officer. You will assist Gort in managing the town's security. The patrol squad will be your direct subordinate. This position is very important. Do not let me down, Karl." The expression on his face changed from disappointment to pleasant surprise in an instant. Karl prostrated. "Sir, thank you for the promotion. Karl is willing to serve Sir for life." In the afternoon, the news of Karl being promoted to a freedman and assuming the post of the Flower Town's defense officer spread throughout the horse farm. Marcus took advantage of a gap in the night squad's training to come over and instruct Liszt in archery practice. They also chatted in passing. Sir, Karl's story made the night squad train more seriously. Especially Rome, Grey, and Odin, the three of them went all out in training. Chi can change fate. It used to be more like a slogan. However, by giving them a living example, they will realize that it is not a slogan, but a real opportunity. Liszt shook his aching wrist. Even he himself was working hard to become stronger. Marcus said, "Sir, it is you who gave them the opportunity to change their fate." There was nothing wrong with this statement. Liszt expressed his approval. Immediately after, he no longer talked about this topic. Instead, he pulled out 4 arrows and practiced the spiral shadow arrow of multiple arrows, making the 4 arrows assume a spiral trajectory. This was the prerequisite to the ultimate meaning of multiple phantom arrow. The key lay in how to create the illusion effect of the arrows. He held 2 arrows between his index finger and 2 between his middle finger. He drew the bow and pulled the bowstring into a full moon. He aimed at the target not far in front of him and suddenly let go. The 4 arrows were shot at the same time. The magic power attached to the arrows dispersed in the air, driving the 4 arrows to spin. Unfortunately, when the magic power of one of the arrows dispersed, it went in the wrong direction, destroying the entire arrow formation. The airflow was twisted and the other 3 arrows were also affected, causing all 4 arrows to miss the target. Still not enough. Liszt put down the bow and recalled what he had done wrong. There were too many things to learn in archery. He had to control the bowstring's strength, the arrow's direction, the balance of magic power, and he had to take into account how to break the wind resistance as well as the acceleration of gravity. Marcus looked at the trajectory of the arrows, his eyes shining. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.